Chapter 953. When Bai Yanqing first received the challenge letter, his first thought was to give up on 100 Poisons sect. But Emperor Kong Qing and Long Tianma's actions reminded him of that fact. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium had caused a huge uproar over the matter until everyone in the world knew about it. Emperor Kong Qing had even invited guests from all sides as the host. With so many people watching, he naturally had to use this chance to embarrass Han Yunxi and consign Eastern and Western Qin to eternal damnation. He'd racked his brains to set up such a huge trap, but he'd failed to incite Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi. Who knew that Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi would create such a perfect opportunity for him? Since Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi wanted to know the reason behind the Great Qin Empire's civil war so badly, he'd have to tell them the truth. Of course, he'd have to tell the two of them, the Eastern and Western Qin factions, and the rest of the world that the Great Qin Empire's civil war had never been a misunderstanding. The hatred between the Eastern and Western Qin imperial clans was irreconcilable. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi could never be together. Before he came to 100 Poisons sect, he'd steeled his heart. No matter how Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi attacked 100 Poisons sect or provoked him, he'd stand at the gates in front of the world. If necessary, he'd even sacrifice 100 Poisons sect. But once he dispelled the last of his misgivings about Bailey Mingxiang, he didn't hesitate to chase up the mountain. Right now, he was still rational, but he was still heading up the mountain. But for the sake of Bailey Mingxiang, he was willing to take a gamble. Once he killed Bailey Mingxiang, he could force Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi down the mountain all the same. Bailey Mingxiang was even more important than inciting Eastern and Western Qin. He didn't even want to take the risk of using Bailey Mingxiang to threaten Long Feiyi. He only wanted to kill him early. No matter what, he would never allow Long Feiyi to cultivate the third stage of the Lustbite power, absolutely not. Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin wouldn't be able to escape far even if the poison corpses were to cover their retreat. Soon, Bai Yanqing caught up to them and easily poisoned the poison corpse to death. He somersaulted a few times in the air and landed in front of Bailey Mingxiang. His sword had already been drawn. Su Donglin was already prepared. He immediately shielded Bailey Mingxiang behind him. One had to know that Bai Yanqing's poison was much faster than his sword. They were still on the slope of the mountain. Fortunately, Su Donglin didn't walk on the stone steps of the main road. Instead, he chose a more secluded path. It would not be easy for the people at the foot of the mountain to find out what was going on here. But even so, Su Donglin still underestimated Bai Yanqing's speed. The place he had agreed to meet with His Highness wasn't here. They still had to walk a little further. Perhaps, it couldn't be said that he underestimated Bai Yanqing's speed. He could only say that he had already tried his best. With his ability, he could only escape to this place. Su Donglin protected Bailey Mingxiang as they retreated step by step. Bai Yanqing didn't move forward. Instead, he pointed his sword at them. Neither he nor Bailey Mingxiang could tell whether Bai Yanqing was using poison or not. They could only take one step at a time and think of ways to stall for time. Bai Yanqing, do you know how Lady Tianqin died? Su Donglin changed the topic. Ordinary topics couldn't attract Bai Yanqing. Su Donglin could only think of Lady Tianqin. Bai Yanqing was most likely the father of the Princess of Western Qin, which meant that he was Lady Tianqin's husband. Speaking of Lady Tianqin, he would at least say a few words. Su Donglin's idea was very good, but Bai Yanqing was very decisive. He didn't say a word. His sword clanged. Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang smelled a strange scent at the same time. They didn't have time to hold their breaths. Poison. It must be poison. If His Highness and the princess could rush over in time, then he and Bailey Mingxiang could be saved. If not, then their lives would be in the hands of Bailey Mingxiang, the #1 hidden weapon of the Tang sect, the Flaming Lotus. Su Donglin, you go first. His target is me. Bailey Mingxiang was ready to risk everything. I'll cooperate with you, Su Donglin said in a low voice. Suddenly, he pulled out his sword and stabbed at Bai Yanqing. Miss Mingxiang, run. His Highness is at the poison corpse pool. As soon as she spoke, Su Donglin's entire body went limp. He'd been standing at the front and inhaled much more poison than Bailey Mingxiang. His poison was acting up. Bai Yanqing stepped on Su Donglin's head and ground it a few times. Coldly, he looked at Bailey Mingxiang. His hands didn't stop moving. He raised his sword. The speed of poisoning was faster than the speed of using a sword, but the speed of killing with a sword was much faster than the speed of killing with poison. Bai Yanqing wanted to slit Bailey Mingxiang's throat. Unexpectedly, just as Bai Yanqing was about to swing his sword, Su Donglin suddenly grabbed Bai Yanqing's leg and pulled him back. Bailey Mingxiang, hurry. Su Donglin didn't have any strength, but he still held on to Bai Yanqing's leg. He was already bleeding from all 7 of his orifices. He was risking his life to buy time for Bailey Mingxiang. He didn't tell Bailey Mingxiang to run. He only said, hurry. Bailey Mingxiang should understand. He had to understand. He wanted Bailey Mingxiang to make a move. He held on tightly to Bai Yanqing. As long as Bailey Mingxiang used the Flaming Lotus, Bai Yanqing would definitely die. What was the Flaming Lotus? The Flaming Lotus was a hidden weapon that could explode a person's body in an instant. At this moment, Bailey Mingxiang didn't need to find a chance to use the Flaming Lotus on Bai Yanqing. Moreover, she would be poisoned soon. There was no chance. What she needed to do now was to make a move before Bai Yanqing broke free from Su Donglin's grip. The opportunity was right in front of her, but Bailey Mingxiang didn't move. Su Donglin roared angrily, Bailey Mingxiang, don't forget your identity. His Highness and the princess hadn't arrived yet. Once both of them died in Bai Yanqing's hands and Bai Yanqing went down the mountain, how could His Highness trick Bai Yanqing into going up the mountain? Their identity was to obey, to sell their lives, and to sacrifice. Bailey Mingxiang didn't forget, but she couldn't do it. If she did, not only would Bai Yanqing's corpse be destroyed, Su Donglin would also be destroyed. While Bailey Mingxiang was hesitating, Bai Yanqing had already kicked Su Donglin away. Su Donglin rolled to the side. Blood flowed out of his 7 orifices and he was unconscious. Almost at the same time, Bailey Mingxiang's poison acted up. She felt as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. She collapsed on the ground weakly. She didn't even have the strength to use the Flaming Lotus. Bai Yanqing didn't want to waste any time. He strode to Bailey Mingxiang and said, Bailey Mingxiang, it's a pity that I didn't get to see your true ability. The taste of this poison isn't bad, right? He sneered, held his sword with both hands, and stabbed down fiercely. Clang! There was a crisp sound as Bai Yanqing's sword broke in half. The sword fell to the side. Bailey Mingxiang had escaped a disaster. She looked at the broken sword hanging in mid-air in disbelief, unable to recover from her shock. However, Bai Yanqing didn't hesitate to hold the broken sword tightly and continued to stab down. At this moment, a sharp sword aura flew over from the side. It was like an arrow leaving the bow. It was so fierce that it could topple mountains and overturn seas. Not only did it overturn the broken sword in Bai Yanqing's hand, it even forced Bai Yanqing to take a few steps back. Bailey Mingxiang looked back and saw 2 figures standing not far away. They weren't far away, but for some reason, she couldn't see them clearly. However, she could still make out the elegance of that beautiful figure, that tall and proud one. The princess and his highness had finally arrived. Bai Yanqing didn't even turn to look at the newcomers. He made a prompt decision and reached out to Bailey Mingxiang. However, Long Fei Yi was staring at him. Long Fei Yi's sword aura directly hit his arm. Han Yunxi had already rushed to the side to help Su Donglin detoxify the poison. Bai Yanqing dodged the sword aura and immediately reached out again. However, Long Fei Yi's sword aura was much faster than his hand. This time, it didn't attack his hand, but his entire body. The sharp sword aura came crashing down. Bai Yanqing had no choice but to dodge and stay away from Bailey Mingxiang. His gaze turned cold. He quickly flew towards Han Yunxi, who was helping Su Donglin detoxify the poison. Who knew that Long Fei Yi would change his perception? This time, Long Fei Yi's sword aura was several times stronger than before. Even though Bai Yanqing dodged, he was still injured by the sword aura. Half of his wide sleeves were cut off. Finally, Bai Yanqing threw away his sword. He didn't move from his original position. With his hands behind his back, he made a few strange gestures. In an instant, the surrounding wind started to blow. Although it didn't blow, it could brush against his face. Bai Yanqing was going to use his poison technique. Han Yunxi had just finished detoxifying Su Donglin. She rushed to Long Fei Yi's side without hesitation. At the same time, Bai Yanqing suddenly turned around and went back to Bailey Mingxiang. Fortunately, Long Fei Yi had been staring at him. Long Fei Yi's sword never stopped. Su Donglin is fine. The poison in Bailey Mingxiang can only last for 10 minutes. Let's end this quickly, Han Yunxi said in a low voice. Long Fei Yi grabbed her waist with one hand and held his sword with the other. He flew into the air and elegantly slashed out. Several sword auras flew at Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing was completely restrained by Long Fei Yi's sword. He couldn't touch Bailey Mingxiang or Su Donglin at all. As for the Imperial Wind Technique's poison, it was completely restrained by Han Yunxi. As long as Han Yunxi was here, his poison technique would be completely restrained. If Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi worked together, he would lose without a doubt. He was very clear on this. This time, he didn't have any plans of winning. He was only chasing after Bailey Mingxiang. Bai Yanqing had already changed from attacking to defending. He dodged several sword auras from Long Fei Yi. After hesitating for a bit, he turned around and ran down the mountain. Bai Yanqing, if you want to kill yourself, this crown prince can leave your corpse intact. Long Fei Yi said. As soon as he finished speaking, a rainbow of sword aura slashed down in front of Bai Yanqing, forcing Bai Yanqing to retreat. Bai Yanqing landed calmly and coldly said, "The lustbite energy is indeed extraordinary." Long Fei Yi landed with Han Yunxi in his arms. Speak, what happened to Eastern and Western Qin in the past? Did your Wind clan do something? And where's the Black clan? Bai Yanqing laughed out loud. Long Fei Yi, the Bailey Army and Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's people are all at the foot of the mountain. It's really interesting for you to ask old man questions like this. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had already deployed large groups of poison guards and poison mercenaries from the City of Daughters to stand guard around the area. Even 100 poison sect's men would find it difficult to get close, much less the people at the foot of the mountain. Today, Bai Yanqing's every word was only known to the two of them. You don't have to speak, but this crown prince promises that you'll regret it. Long Fei Yi warned. Bai Yanqing laughed even louder. Long Fei Yi, I'll speak, but you better not regret it. Ha! Chapter 954. What did Long Fei Yi have to regret? Since he dared to ask Bai Yanqing for the truth, he wasn't afraid of the consequences. He and Han Yunshi attacked from the back of the mountain, led by Yanqing up the mountain, and avoided the group of spectators at the foot of the mountain. He didn't do all this for nothing. No matter what Bai Yanqing said, he was prepared to bear the consequences. He just wanted to figure out what happened back then, who was right and who was wrong in the East, Western Qin, or if, as they guessed, everything was provoked. What did the Feng clan do in this provocation? What did the Black clan do? He even wanted to know why the Neutral Li clan disbanded their huge army so decisively back then. Just say it. Long Feiyi replied. Of course, Long Feiyi wasn't stupid enough to completely believe Bai Yanqing. What he wanted to do was to find some clues from Bai Yanqing's words. Bai Yanqing sneered. Even if he didn't tell the truth in front of the world, as long as Han Yunshi and Long Feiyi were present, he could still say it. He would make Long Feiyi and Han Yunshi regret it. Okay, you two listen carefully. Bai Yanqing's face became serious. Long Feiyi and Han Yunshi didn't say anything, waiting. Not far away, Bailey Mingxiang, who had fallen to the ground, also listened quietly. Back then, Bai Yanqing opened his mouth, as if to keep them in suspense. He deliberately paused and didn't continue. Instead, he looked meaningfully at Long Feiyi. The surroundings were silent, and the atmosphere gradually became tense. The mockery in Bai Yanqing's eyes became more and more intense. After a pause, he continued, back then, the flood of the Sha River was actually, say no more. Han Yunshi suddenly interrupted him domineeringly. Long Feiyi didn't care about the truth. He just wanted to know. As for Han Yunshi, she didn't even want to know the truth. Back in the three-way black market, she had already made up her mind to ignore what happened between East and Western Qin back then. Bai Yanqing was a little stunned. Long Feiyi glanced at Han Yunshi, but didn't stop her. Han Yunshi, you. Bai Yanqing didn't understand what Han Yunshi meant. Han Yunshi narrowed her eyes and said coldly, Long Feiyi, kill him. If Long Fei didn't know the truth behind Han Yunshi's transmigration, he might have asked her, don't you want to know the truth? However, now that he knew she was not the real princess of West Qin, he understood why she was so resolute. Since she didn't want to know Sname's not. In his heart, there was no difference between knowing and not knowing. It wouldn't affect his decisions. I'll listen to you. Long Feiyi said and raised his sword. Bai Yanqing couldn't believe it. These two people, one was Western Qin's princess and the other was East Qin's crown prince. Even if they could ignore their hatred and love each other. However, how could they give up on the truth? Long Feiyi didn't hate Han Yunshi, but how could he not hate the Western Qin camp? Han Yunshi didn't hate Long Feiyi, but how could she forget the East Qin camp's massacre of Western Qin? You really don't want to know the truth? Bai Yanqing angrily asked. The truth? Han Yunshi domineeringly said to Bai Yanqing, who cares if it dies? Bai Yanqing was so shocked that he couldn't speak. If Han Yunshi and Long Feiyi didn't care about the truth, then what was the point of him coming here to fight? Bai Yanqing, you really want to say it, right? I'm sorry, but you won't have the chance. Han Yunshi said this and then said to Long Feiyi in a low voice, do it. Long Feiyi immediately made his move, slashing down with his sword without any hesitation. Although Bai Yanqing dodged, he was still injured by the powerful sword qi, falling to the side as he spat out a mouthful of blood. When he dodged, he didn't forget to use poison, but it was a pity that it was all blocked by Han Yunshi. Long Feiyi, you've let down the East Qin ancestors. Bai Yanqing angrily cursed. Han Yunshi was a woman, so she could be willful. However, Long Feiyi was a man and he had known his mission since he was young, so how could he give up like this? Long Feiyi learned Han Yunshi's words. He didn't say it as domineering as Han Yunshi, but it was incomparably cold as he said, "Who cares? Die." As soon as his voice fell, another sword slashed down. Bai Yanqing rolled to the side as his internal organs were almost shattered. Blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Bai Yanqing finally drew his sword, but Long Fei did not give him a chance to swing it. Long Fei's sword strike after sword strike was fierce and fast, not stopping at all. Bai Yanqing was overwhelmed. He dodged while shouting at Han Yunshi, "Han Yunshi, the Wind Clan did not betray Western Qin. The Black Clan colluded with the East Qin Crown Prince in the past to destroy the dam to protect the iron mine. It was East Qin that abandoned the world. It was East Qin that ordered the Black Clan to attack the Wind Clan. It was East Qin that let down Western Qin and the world." Long Fei and Han Yunshi did not say anything. What answered Bai Yanqing was Long Fei's sword qi that was stronger than the last. Han Yunshi, the Western Qin royal family, was exterminated in the past, not leaving a single person alive. How cruel was that? This was all because of East Qin. The East Qin royal family already had the ambition to swallow Western Qin. Could it be you can't see it? Han Yunshi, what is the truth? Long Fei is the clearest on this. He has been lying to you the entire time. As soon as his voice fell, Long Fei's sword qi hit Bai Yanqing's abdomen, sending his entire body flying. He hit several large trees before finally landing on a cliff. Bai Yanqing's body was covered in blood and he was on the verge of death, but he was still holding on. Han Yunshi, old man has ambition. But the Wind Clan definitely did not have the heart to betray you. Long Fei wants to use you to take care of the D clan, can't you see it? If someone who didn't know saw this scene, they would think that Bai Yanqing was a loyal minister, using his life to persuade him. But Han Yunshi did not answer him. She had been seriously helping Long Fei block Bai Yanqing's various poison attacks. Han Yunshi, do you know how many people in Western Qin have died unjustly, waiting for you to avenge them? Han Yunshi, old man can die, but you can't not believe the truth of that year. Bai Yanqing had one hand on his chest and the other on the ground. It seemed like he was not going to dodge. He said it as if it was true. If she had not experienced so much with Long Fei, perhaps Han Yunshi would really believe Bai Yanqing. Kill him. Han Yunshi still said the same thing, determined not to change. Bai Yanqing had fallen to this point. Whether he was telling the truth or not, he had to die. With Bai Yanqing's cunning personality, if he did not provoke them before he died, would he be satisfied? Once they decided not to take the truth to heart, no one would be able to provoke them. Nothing would be able to affect them. Long Fei raised his sword. Instead of slashing, he was going to stab directly. Behind him was a cliff. Bai Yanqing would not be able to dodge this attack. Just as Long Fei was about to strike, Bai Yanqing suddenly stopped him. Wait. Should he wait just because he said so? Long Fei's sword waited for no one. Unexpectedly, Bai Yanqing said, Han Yunshi, I'm your father. You can't do this to me. In the end, Long Fei's sword stopped. Han Yunshi was a direct descendant of the poison sect, and so was Bai Yanqing. They had long suspected this. But Han Yunshi had never pursued the matter, so he had not asked. Now that Bai Yanqing had spoken, he had no choice but to stop his sword. You knew my identity from the very beginning, but you refused to acknowledge me. What are your motives? You're clearly using me. Han Yunshi retorted angrily. Long Fei had long told her that Lady Hellion was a spy. Lady Hellion hadn't entered the Han estate late. In other words, Bai Yanqing had found out her identity years ago. You're saying that you were the one who killed my mother? Han Yunshi demanded. Bai Yanqing played the emotional card. Daughter, your mother's death was the most painful thing in my life. No matter what, you have to believe me. I would never do something so heartless. Then why don't you acknowledge me? Han Yunshi asked next. I have my own difficulties. Yunshi, come here. Father will definitely give you an explanation for this. Come here first. Believe your father, Long Fei Yi, is using you. Don't be fooled by him. Bai Yanqing coaxed earnestly. Han Yunshi only said word by word, Long Fei Yi, I only trust you in this world. What are you still hesitating for? Long Fei Yi understood and pointed his sword at Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing was alarmed. Han Yunshi, no matter what, I'm your father. Your biological father. You're not. You're not. Han Yunshi shouted back. Bai Yanqing still wanted to argue, but Long Fei Yi had already thrown his sword at Bai Yanqing's heart. Old clan head. Shi Jiuxia's voice suddenly called out. Be careful of poison. Han Yunshi pulled Long Fei Yi away and stored Shi Jiuxia's poison powder into her poison storage space. Shi Jiuxia saw Bai Yanqing lying paralyzed in front of his chest and couldn't believe it. Old clan head. Old clan head. Bai Yanqing only had one last breath left. He gripped the sword and pulled it out viciously, causing a pool of blood to spurt out of his chest. He gripped Long Fei Yi's sword and struggled to his feet. He pointed at Han Yunshi and cursed, Patricide, you'll be struck by lightning. Han Yunshi was stunned, her face ashen. Bai Yanqing wasn't her father, nor did he deserve to be, but blood relations couldn't be changed. At this moment, Long Fei made a grabbing motion and grabbed Profound Frost's sword before viciously kicking Bai Yanqing into the abyss ahead. Old clan head. Shi Jiuxia shouted. Long Fei Yi took Han Yunshi and chased after him. For someone like Bai Yanqing, they had to see his corpse even if he was dead. Halfway through their chase, they saw Bai Yanqing hanging from a tree trunk on the cliff. Long Fei Yi tested him and confirmed that he was no longer breathing. He glanced at Han Yunshi and saw that Han Yunshi was silent. He was still decisive. He cut the tree trunk with his sword and said to Han Yunshi, It's none of your business. I killed him. After watching Bai Yanqing's corpse fall into the abyss and disappear, Long Fei Yi brought Han Yunshi back to the cliff. On the cliff, Shi Jiuxia knelt on the ground in a daze. Su Donglin was still unconscious. Bailey Mingxiang lay on the ground, her face as pale as a corpse. Han Yunshi had already recovered. She strode toward Bailey Mingxiang and quickly detoxified her. After detoxifying her, she fell to the ground. Everything that happened today was going according to plan. However, she didn't know why, but she felt inexplicably uneasy. Long Fei Yi stood beside her and stared at Shi Jiuxia, who wasn't far away. Although there were still many things to do, he would give Han Yunshi enough time. After all, the word patricide was too heavy. Everything seemed to have calmed down. However, no one expected what happened in the abyss at this moment. Chapter 955. At this very moment, an extremely frightening thing was happening in the abyss. Bai Yanqing was clearly dead. He'd been shot in the heart and had fallen from such a high place. Moreover, Long Fei Yi had already confirmed that he wasn't breathing. However, he actually stood up shakily. Yes. He wasn't dead. He would never die. Unless Long Fei Yi could cultivate to the third level of the Lustbite energy and combine it with his nirvana powers to control the world's greatest power, no one in this world would be able to kill him. Except for time, except for natural aging, he was invincible in this world. Because he'd already uncovered the secret recipe for the poison sect's legendary poison goo man, he'd raised himself into a poison goo man in a fit of rage after being hurt by love. Thus, Long Fei Ye's lustbite energy was his only nemesis. Even if he had to give up on inciting discord between Eastern and Western Qin, he still wanted Bailey Mingxiang dead. Of course, he wouldn't easily reveal that he was a poison goo man. He didn't want to become the world's enemy, Cloud Realm's public enemy. Besides, one of the poisons needed to break the perplexing butterfly illusion was the poison goo man's blood. Once his secret was exposed, he'd be in big trouble. Breaking the perplexing butterfly illusion required the 5 elements poisons: water, earth, fire, metal, and wood of 10,000 poisons. He also needed the 4 great poisons: poison beast blood, poison corpse blood, beauty's blood, and poison goo man's blood. He controlled the world's only poison goo man's blood. The poison beast blood could be regenerated, the 10,000-year-old poison corpse blood jade could be found, and the beauty's blood could be reproduced. However, the poison goo man's blood was unique. Even if he had the secret recipe for raising a poison goo man, he wouldn't be able to raise a second one. That was because all the poison plants were unique. He'd already used them all back then. When he'd heard about Goo's childhood in Medical City, he'd suspected that Goo had been secretly raised as a poison goo man, which was why he was immune to all kinds of diseases. But after careful consideration, he rejected this idea. He didn't know what kind of physique Goo had, and he wasn't very interested. Now, his enemies were Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, the East Qin camp and the Western Qin camp. He was curious whether Han Yunxi couldn't accept her background or whether she knew the truth. That was why she was so determined not to acknowledge him. He didn't mind slowly figuring out everything, playing with them slowly and making the stakes bigger. He wanted to see who would regret it in the end. Bai Yanqing went up the cliff. The cliff was so high that he could not see the end. He could only see a vast expanse of whiteness above his head. There was fog in the abyss. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and turned to leave. His thin figure quickly disappeared into the forest. At this moment, the little thing, which had been in a daze for a long time, finally regained its senses. Heavens, I clearly felt Mama Yunqi's presence just then. Very close. Could it be that the owner of the dark space had gone to find Mama Yunqi? Why is this naughty fellow looking for Mama Yunqi? Does Mama Yunqi know I've been locked up? What was the situation now? It couldn't feel Mama Yunqi again. Lil Thing became irritated and charged forward with all its might into the darkness ahead. However, it was quickly bounced back by an invisible force. Because of the contract, it could not only enter and exit Mama Yunqi's poison storage space, but also sense what was happening outside. But now that it was locked up in the dark space, it couldn't sense anything outside. It could only sense Mama Yunqi's approach. Could it be that Mama Yunqi has left? The more Lil Thing thought, the more uneasy it felt. Unconsciously, it thought of the gentleman. Suddenly, it raised its head and let out a howl. The howl echoed heavily in the large black space, sounding especially desolate. Gentlemen, don't die, all right? Mama Yunqi, where are you? Lil Thing misses you guys. Currently, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were still on the cliff. Long Fei Yi had given Han Yunxi plenty of time, so she didn't tarry for long. Of course Han Yunxi was worried about Lil Thing. Like Gu Beiyue, she suspected that Lil Thing was in Bai Yanqing's poison storage space. She didn't know if the poison storage space would disappear after a person died. She could only deal with the important matters at hand first before looking for Lil Thing. Killing Bai Yanqing was just a means. What came next was their true goal. This was her true resolve from the start. No matter how uneasy her heart was, she had to hide it and endure it. At this point, there was no reason to waste all her previous efforts. She could only keep moving forward. At the very least, she knew she hadn't wronged or disappointed anyone with her choice. She wanted to be together with Long Fei-yi openly. She wanted there to be no more enmity between Western Qin and Eastern Qin. She wanted to join hands with Long Fei-yi to build a new nation. She wanted the land they ruled to be eternally peaceful. Han Yunshi stood up and said coldly, "Shi Jiuxia, tell me, how should this princess silence you?" Shi Jiuxia had killed his way out of the encirclement of female mercenaries and poison guards to find his way here. He'd heard everything Bai Yanqing had said, including the fact that Han Yunshi was Bai Yanqing's daughter. It had to be said that Shi Jiuxia was astonished by all of this. "Han Yunshi, you killed your father," Shi Jiuxia reprimanded. Bai Yanqing was killed by this crown prince. He slandered my East Qin and sowed discord between Western Qin and Eastern Qin. He deserved to die. Long Fei-yi raged. "It was your East Qin that started the war back then. Long Fei-yi, your East Qin is the culprit that destroyed the great Qin Empire," Shi Jiuxia accused. Long Fei-yi was about to speak when Han Yunshi firmly said, "No. Bai Yanqing didn't say that just now." "Shi Jiuxia, you heard wrong. Bai Yanqing said that the enmity between Western Qin and Eastern Qin was instigated by the Feng clan. The enmity between Western Qin and Eastern Qin was just a misunderstanding. The culprit, the Feng clan, was admitted by Bai Yanqing himself." Han Yunshi was lying through her teeth. In fact, she had already prepared these lines. As long as Bai Yanqing was dead, the truth would be determined by her and Long Fei-yi. Even if she had to lie to the world, she would go all out. Seeing Han Yunshi's cold eyes, the originally aggressive Shi Jiuxia was a bit scared and unconsciously took a step back. Of course, he understood what Han Yunshi's words meant. Han Yunshi was warning him to cooperate with their lies, or else they'd kill him to silence him. Shi Jiuxia had always lived in seclusion, wholeheartedly helping Jun Yixie manage the 100 Poison sect. He wasn't very clear about the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin. He had heard that Han Yunshi was a very ruthless woman, but he never thought that Han Yunshi would be this ruthless. Not only did this woman kill her father, she also wanted to deceive both Eastern and Western Qin, deceiving the world. The most terrifying thing was that this woman in front of him didn't have the slightest bit of fear or guilt. Instead, she was so domineering, decisive, and magnificent. What kind of woman was this? Shi Jiuxia was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. Long Fei-yi's sword was already at his neck. Long Fei-yi said, "You don't have much time left. Choose for yourself if you want to die here or continue to lead the 100 Poison sect." This was a combination of kindness and severity. "Elder Shi, do you believe that Bai Yanqing is prepared to sacrifice the 100 Poison sect today? Why would you linger around such a master?" Han Yunshi sneered. "If not for Long Fei-yi's plan, I would have destroyed the poisonous corpse pool. I'll also tell you responsibly that even if the poisonous corpse pool is destroyed, even if I burn down the 100 Poison sect, Bai Yanqing won't come up the mountain." Shi Jiuxia didn't understand the affairs of the world. He didn't know why Bai Yanqing wanted to stay at the pagoda at the foot of the mountain. In fact, he was also very surprised by Bai Yanqing's sudden appearance today. He was so anxious on the mountain that he thought Bai Yanqing wouldn't come. He thought that 100 Poison sect's reputation would be completely lost. He was already dissatisfied with Bai Yanqing's actions today. After hearing Han Yunshi's words, he was somewhat shaken. Seeing the hesitation in Shi Jiuxia's eyes, Han Yunshi pressed on. "Shi Jiuxia, do you think the 100 Poison sect can survive if you die?" As she spoke, she suddenly closed in, narrowed her eyes and warned fiercely, "I promise I'll burn this mountain down. I mean what I say. Long Fei Yi didn't like Han Yunxi getting too close to any man. Before he could pull Han Yunxi back, Shi Jiuxia stumbled back in fright. He stared at Han Yunxi in disbelief. Although he wasn't the head of the sect, he devoted his entire life to the 100 Poisons sect. He'd poured his heart and soul into the sect. How could he bear to see the sect destroyed? Long Fei Yi silently lowered his hand and continued to watch as Han Yunxi subdued Shi Jiuxia. If Bai Yanqing died, it wouldn't be easy to convince the people at the foot of the mountain to believe him and Han Yunxi. However, it would be much easier if Shi Jiuxia stepped forward. Shi Jiuxia, I'm a direct descendant of the Poison sect and its head. Medical City has already acknowledged my status and cleared the Poison sect's name. If you surrender to me, do you think I'll treat you unfairly? I promise you the position of head of the 100 Poison sect will be yours. Moreover, Medical and Medicine City will never ostracize 100 Poison sect again, Han Yunxi added. She'd laid out 2 paths for Shi Jiuxia. One was a dead end, while the other was a broad, open road. Shi Jiuxia's heart belonged to the 100 Poison sect, not Bai Yanqing or Jun Yixia. How could he not be moved? But he was still hesitant. How could there be such a good deal in the world? Would Han Yunxi trust him so much? Wasn't Han Yunxi afraid he'd reveal the truth one day? Before he could probe further, Han Yunxi tossed him a bottle of poison. Coldly, she said, if you don't want to die, drink this poison. I'll only give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Looking at the poison in his hand, Shi Jiuxia felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He wanted the 100 Poison sect to survive and become one of Cloud Realm Continent's honorable powers one day. Even more than that, he wanted to continue living well. Without hesitation, Shi Jiuxia downed the antidote in one gulp. He was an expert in poisons, but even he couldn't tell what kind of poison it was. He only knew that it was a poison that flared up on a regular basis. After confirming that Shi Jiuxia had taken the antidote, Han Yunxi exhaled in relief. Every 10 days, I'll have someone give you an antidote. If you're curious about the consequences of the poison, you can give it a try. But you'll definitely regret it. Shi Jiuxia was curious, but Han Yunxi's tone made it impossible for him to test it. Everyone who made poisons knew how terrible it would be to live a life worse than death after the poison acted up. Han Yunxi whistled to summon a poison guard to send the unconscious Su Donglin down the mountain. Bailey Mingxiang recovered her strength after the antidote was cured. She clutched the raging red lotus flame in her sleeve, uneasy, but still came forward. Princess, Your Highness, this servant. Chapter 956. Princess, Your Highness, this servant has failed you. Bailey Mingxiang's heart was filled with apprehension. If she was asked whether she regretted it now, she wouldn't know how to answer. After all, she couldn't bear to watch Su Donglin die without doing anything. Everything had already happened, and Bai Yanqing was dead. Bailey Mingxiang was no longer of any use in this matter. Long Fei Yi didn't say much. He only said indifferently, after we leave the mountain, return to the army. When they left the garrison, Long Fei Yi conferred the military rank of Bailey Mingxiang. After Bai Yanqing's matter was settled, she naturally had to return to the army and stay at her post. Although she was reluctant, Bailey Mingxiang still secretly sighed in relief. She knew better than anyone that leaving them was the greatest redemption in her life. Redemption for herself. Red Lotus Raging Fire. Bailey Mingxiang whispered, wanting to return the item. However, Han Yunxi said, no need. Keep it for self-defense. You may not be safe with Bai Yanqing dead. Only the heavens knew if Bai Yanqing had told others about their dual cultivation. Long Fei Yi had created so many misunderstandings and created so many rumors about Bailey Mingxiang. Once Bai Yanqing revealed the matter, there would be many people in the world who wanted Bailey Mingxiang's life. "Thank you, Your Highness." Bailey Mingxiang bowed. After hesitating for a moment, she still said seriously, "Princess, please take care of yourself. Mingxiang won't be able to serve you in the future." Han Yunxi finally realized that this was a long separation. Bailey Mingxiang was going to return to the army. It was very likely that she wouldn't have the chance to be by their side in this lifetime. "You take care too." She helped Bailey Mingxiang up and gently shook Bailey Mingxiang's cold hand. If it weren't for the rumors in the army, if it weren't for the crowd at the bonfire party that night, they wouldn't have been so awkward. Han Yunxi sighed softly. She quickly ordered several female mercenaries to escort Bailey Mingxiang back and instructed seriously, "Find a few people to disguise themselves and go in different directions. Don't be followed. Also, you must keep a low profile in the army." Su Donglin was unconscious, so other than Shi Jiuxia, Bailey Mingxiang was the only one who had heard what Bai Yanqing said. However, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi didn't guard against Bailey Mingxiang. If Bailey Mingxiang wanted to betray them, he wouldn't have waited until now. After sending off Bailey Mingxiang, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi went down the mountain with Shi Jiuxia. Along the way, Han Yunxi kept talking to Shi Jiuxia. Long Fei Yi didn't interrupt and listened quietly. Long Fei Yi noticed that Han Yunxi's eyes were downcast. She was in a bad mood. After killing Bai Yanqing and getting the truth, as long as they could convince the people at the foot of the mountain, there would be no more hatred between Eastern and Western Qin. There would be no insurmountable gap between them. This was what they were all looking forward to, wasn't it? However, Long Fei Yi didn't see any joy on her face. Even if she hid it well, he could see how much the word patricide affected her. At this moment, most of the people at the foot of the mountain stood up and waited. They didn't know what was going on. Even the disciples of the 100 Poison sect didn't know what was going on. What's going on? Are they fighting? Who won? Are they still fighting? Where are they? How long are they going to fight? Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi can't beat Bai Yanqing if they work together, right? Can anyone say something? Where's Elder Shi? Come out and say something. Many people couldn't wait and started shouting. However, most of them were nobodies. The real big shots didn't say anything and just sat there quietly, waiting. For example, Mu Qingwu and the people from Eastern and Western Qin. They couldn't figure out why Bai Yanqing was indifferent when Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi attacked 100 Poison sect. However, when Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin led the poison corpses up the mountain, Bai Yanqing immediately chased after them. What was going on? Although Bailey Qiyu knew about Bailey Mingxiang's fake dual cultivation, he didn't know much about it. He wasn't smart enough to figure out that it was Long Fei Ye's plan to lure Bai Yanqing up the mountain. Neither Eastern and Western Qin nor Mu Qingwu were worried about the outcome of this battle. They were confident in Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. They only hoped that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi would quickly capture Bai Yanqing and come down the mountain to confront the grudges between Eastern and Western Qin. Soon, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi appeared in front of the crowd. Step by step, Long Fei and Han Yunxi descended the mountain, then ascended the battle stage. Shi Jiuxia followed them and stood next to them. For a moment, everyone was dumbfounded. The few people who were sitting also stood up. As for Mu Qingwu, he forgot about everything else when he saw Han Yunxi. She was the only one in his mind. Bailey Qiyu had long known about His Highness and Han Yunxi's relationship. He was most concerned about the grudges between Eastern and Western Qin. He remembered that His Highness and Han Yunxi had promised to meet on the battlefield if necessary. Bailey Qiyu was the first to speak. "Your Highness, where is Bai Yanqing?" Long Fei Yi remained silent, but it was Shi Jiuxia who spoke. Everyone, I am Shi Joshia, the head of the 100 Poison Sect's Elder Council. Bai Yanqing hasn't joined the 100 Poison Sect yet, but I am already a disciple. Bai Yanqing is both a descendant of the Poison Sect and the Feng clan, but he has always concealed his identity. No one in the 100 Poison Sect knows of his origins until today when I heard Bai Yanqing arguing with Western Qin's princess and East Qin's crown prince. Only then did I know the truth. As soon as these words came out, the noisy crowd quieted down. But Shi Joshia's next words were like a bomb that sent the crowd into an uproar. Bai Yanqing has already died by the East Qin crown prince's sword. His corpse lies in the abyss behind Mount Dayang. Dead? Bai Yanqing's really dead. This, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's third elder immediately asked, Your Highness, why didn't you escort Bai Yanqing down the mountain? Back then, we agreed to question Bai Yanqing and confront East Qin about the civil war. Bai Yanqing wasn't killed by this princess. You should ask the East Qin crown prince that question, Han Yunxi replied. Third elder shot a questioning look at Long Feiyi, but Long Feiyi ignored him and pretended not to notice. Shi Joshia looked towards the other elders of the consortium and said, Everyone, there's no need for a confrontation between Eastern and Western Qin anymore. The civil war in the Great Qin Empire wasn't the fault of either Western Qin or East Qin. It was. Before Shi Joshia could finish, someone in the crowd cut him off. Elder Shi, you're quite the busybody, aren't you? Since when did you have a say in the enmity between Eastern, Western Qin? Neither master of Eastern, Western Qin is in a rush, so why are you? What a joke. His words were full of sarcasm. But the crowd was puzzled as well. Shi Joshia was an elder of the 100 Poison Sect and a true manager. What right did he have to stand here and speak? He'd led the 100 Poison Sect disciples to commit so many crimes that it was already good enough that he hadn't become public enemy number one. Shi Joshia was a man of character, but he remained as steady as empty tie. He retorted, What's this big brother's background? Why are you meddling in other people's business? What's the rush? That person wasn't from East Qin or Western Qin, so he had nothing to say. But Bailey Chiyu couldn't take it anymore. Cold, he asked, Shi Joshia, who do you think you are? You don't have a say in the affairs of Eastern, Western Qin. The civil war was instigated by East Qin with ulterior motives. What the hell do you know? What nonsense are you spouting? Get out. Shi Joshia lived up to his reputation as an elder. He remained calm and said seriously, I don't have the right to comment on the grievances between Eastern, Western Qin, but as an elder of the 100 Poison Sect, I have the right to denounce Bai Yanqing. I want to announce everything Bai Yanqing has done to the public. Everyone quieted down after he said that. Shi Joshia's reason was sufficient. Back then, the grievances between Eastern and Western Qin were instigated by the Feng clan. They slandered East Qin for destroying the dam to protect the iron mine. With a cold smile, he replied, This one is only speaking on behalf of the 100 Poison Sect. You have no right to speak on behalf of Eastern, Western Qin, much less this one. Naturally, Eastern, Western Qin and Western Qin have the final say in their affairs. He then added, Western Qin's princess has already accepted this one's surrender. If third elder doesn't believe me, then, Shi Joshia's words were such a coincidence. If third elder didn't believe him, then he didn't believe Han Yunxi either. Who would openly doubt their own master? Unless, he wanted to rebel. Chapter 957. Shi Joshia's words rendered third elder speechless. But third elder wasn't convinced in his heart. He knitted his brows at Han Yunxi, unable to believe what he'd just heard. How could the grudges between generations, the knots between the two imperial clans, and the enmity between the two factions be erased with a few words. They couldn't believe it without hearing it with their own ears. Third elder bowed respectfully. Princess, there's something fishy about this matter. I ask that you take it seriously. Third elder was smart enough not to openly oppose Han Yunxi or question Han Yunxi. Instead, he used persuasion to express his suspicions. Han Yunxi had already established her authority among myriad merchant hall's elders, but she wasn't completely intimidated by Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's Council of Elders. No one dared to refute her words yet. Still, Han Yunxi wasn't stupid. She didn't want to start a fight with Third Elder and become a joke to the world. She said seriously, Third Elder's words are very true. There were many people present just then, not just me. The East Qin Crown Prince, the Bailey Army's Miss Ming Xiang, the head of the East Qin Shadow Guards, Su Donglin, the 100 Poison Sect's Elder Shi, the 100 Poison Sect's disciples, and this princess's poison guards and mercenaries were all present. This princess wouldn't have misheard or made a wrong judgment. The people Han Yunxi listed all belonged to the two factions, so they could all be witnesses. As soon as she said this, apart from the two camps, most of the outsiders present believed this result. After all, who wouldn't want revenge after such a huge feud between nations? If not for the truth, how could Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi have made peace so easily? Thus, there was still plenty of discussion around them. Everyone was shocked by the truth and grew nervous. After all, the truth was going to change the balance of power in Cloud Realm Continent. If Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi weren't husband and wife, then even if East and West Qin didn't have any enmity between them, Western Qin and Eastern Qin would still fight for supremacy in Cloud Realm Continent. It was impossible to restore the peace of the Great Qin era. However, the original relationship between Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi made the current situation more uncertain. If Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi didn't intend to mend their relationship, then the two of them would still be enemies after all. If Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi reconciled, would Eastern and Western Qin cooperate? And after the cooperation between Eastern and Western Qin, would there be people in the two camps who would be dissatisfied and take the opportunity to establish their own factions? It could be said that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi's union would decide the future of Cloud Realm Continent for the next few years. It was even possible that it would decide its future. While the outsiders were thinking about the future, the people from both camps were still fixated on what had happened today. In fact, their unwillingness to accept the truth was greater than their suspicions. Unlike the Western Qin camp, Long Fei Yi had absolute control over the East Qin camp. Bailey Qiyu had his doubts, but he didn't dare say a word. He decided to ask his little sister later and find out what was going on. This was too big a matter for him to handle. He couldn't interfere with His Highness's decision, so he had to discuss it with his father first. The elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium exchanged glances. They didn't know that Han Yunxi had gone to Long Fei Yi's camp as a hostage, nor did they know that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were working together now. Still, they couldn't accept the grudges between the two imperial clans being settled so easily. Third Elder didn't question Han Yunxi's answer, but he didn't accept it either. Instead, he remained silent. The truth had been revealed, the misunderstanding cleared, and the enmity dissolved. This should have been a cause for celebration, but aside from the discussions of the outsiders, no one from either camp showed any signs of excitement. The atmosphere wasn't good at all. There was a limit to what outsiders could say. What really affected the big picture were the opinions of the two camps. Seeing Bailey Qiyu and the other elders silent, everyone felt that something was off and quieted down. Mu Qingwu looked at the couple on stage and thought, if this world belongs to them, what's there for me to refuse to accept? The Cloud Realm Trade Consortium elders assumed that Bailey Qiyu would stand up and say something, but he didn't say a word. It was as if he completely agreed with Shi Jiuxia's words. keeping quiet wasn't a solution either. The elders finally lost their cool. If only it was Master Ning, third elder sighed with emotion. There's definitely something wrong here. Just then, the princess was the only one on the mountain. Everyone else was from East Qin. Could the princess have been tricked by them? Fourth elder said worriedly. Just where is Master Ning? If he was kidnapped, he should have come to extort money by now. Third elder fretted. But... Fifth elder hesitated before he said seriously, the two of you, if there's something fishy about this matter, the East Qin crown prince should have been able to tell. Moreover, Bai Yanqing has no reason to fake the truth. Third elder and fourth elder became even more silent after hearing this. After all, the enmity between East Qin and West Qin wasn't one-sided. Western Qin hated East Qin, but both sides insisted that it was the other side who started the civil war and destroyed the peace of the past. A woman like Han Yunxi might be tricked, but how could Long Feiyi make such a huge mistake? If this wasn't the truth, how could Long Feiyi, the East Qin crown prince, let Western Qin off so easily? How could he write off the enmity of the past so easily? The third elder and the fourth elder looked at each other and agreed with the fifth elder's thinking. However, this wasn't enough to convince them of the truth. At this critical moment, in front of everyone, the elders couldn't question Han Yunxi or go against Han Yunxi. However, if they didn't say anything now, Han Yunxi wouldn't listen to them after this. Old third, how about we make a statement? Just say this matter. Just say that we'll discuss this matter another day and have the princess come back with us. Fourth elder lowered his voice. Third elder also had this plan. As long as they delayed this matter and didn't make a statement today, they wouldn't need to acknowledge this debt in the future. Actually, taking 10,000 steps back, even if there was no enmity between the two royal families, they still had to create enmity. Otherwise, if Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi reunited, how could Western Qin compete with East Qin for Cloud Realm Continent? Han Yunxi was a woman rarely seen in 100 years, but no matter how good her skills were, she couldn't compare to a man like Long Feiyi. While the elders were hesitating, Long Feiyi opened his mouth. He stood high up on the battle stage, looking around at the crowd. His deep and cold eyes seemed to look down on the world. As expected of Long Feiyi, a single look from him was enough to intimidate everyone present. Third elder who was about to speak couldn't help closing his mouth. Long Feiyi said, in the past, Great Qin had internal strife and the country was destroyed. The two royal families had enmity for over 100 years, and today, the truth has been revealed to the world. In the past, the internal strife between the Eastern and Western Qin royal families was caused by the Wind Clan's instigation. Today, this prince has personally killed the Wind Clan's descendant, Bai Yanqing. However, this enmity has yet to be avenged. Bai Yanqing's disciple, the 100 Poison sect master, Juni Xia, has come to Northernly, coveting our southern fertile lands. Long Feiyi's words stopped here. The entire crowd was silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on him, waiting for him to continue. After getting rid of Bai Yanqing, Juni Xia was naturally the target of public criticism. How to deal with Juni Xia was what he was most concerned about. However, Long Feiyi's next move caused the entire crowd to boil. He took Han Yunxi's hand, intertwined their fingers, and raised it high. What did this mean? Actually, there was no need for words. These tightly intertwined fingers meant that Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi were reunited. They would join forces to deal with Juni Xia and deal with Northernly. Before Long Feiyi could continue, third elder immediately spoke up, Your Highness. Unfortunately, Long Feiyi didn't give him the chance. Long Feiyi's cold voice suppressed third elders, not only stopping him from speaking, but also making everyone forget about him. Third elder was extremely embarrassed, but Long Fei continued, "This crown prince announces that from this day forth, East Qin and Western Qin will work together to resist the invasions and raids of the northern cavalry. We will protect the peace of the Central Plains and the South." Cries of alarm rose from the crowd at his words. If the sight of Long Fei and Han Yunxi holding hands was shocking enough, then Long Fei's words were enough to stun all of Cloud Realm continent. He had never held hands with her so openly and forcefully before, facing the world with her. This was the first time. It would also be the beginning of countless times in the future. Han Yunxi's heart was filled with all sorts of indescribable feelings. She didn't care what Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's Council of Elders thought. Loudly, she declared, "I, the Princess of Western Qin, the wife of Long Fei. From this day forth, I will join hands with him to resist the enemy and create a new golden age for Great Qin." The cries of alarm grew louder at her words. Some even cheered for Han Yunxi. What other confession could surpass these words? What other confession could be so domineering and powerful? What other kind of confession could be so emotional? What other woman could be braver and more resolute than Han Yunxi? Han Yunxi looked at the vast crowd, steady and calm. She was a very resolute person. Once she'd made up her mind, she wouldn't change it or turn back. She knew that this was the most courageous decision she'd ever made in her life. Right now, she was looking straight ahead, not at the crowd, but into the distance and into the future. Meanwhile, Long Fei had turned to look at her, his eyes filled with unprecedented tenderness and infatuation. He never thought that he'd see a day like this, when he could see her beautiful profile with such infatuation. All sorts of voices rose from the crowd. Although there were many doubts, the cheers still won out. Bailey Qiyu had long predicted this, so he remained relatively calm. Mu Qingwu smiled bitterly, but only he knew what he was laughing about. The faces of the Cloud Realm Trade Consortium elders all turned white. They would never allow such a thing to happen. Neither would Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders. If Han Yunxi admitted to being husband and wife with Long Fei, then the two of them wouldn't just be working together. Eastern and Western Qin were going to become one. When that happened, wouldn't the D clan have to take orders from Long Fei too? Third elder couldn't take it anymore. He rushed to the front of the stage and raged, "Princess! You!" Unfortunately, a wave of very orderly exclamations suddenly burst out from the surroundings, abruptly drowning out the latter half of his words. On the stage, Long Fei. Chapter 958. Why were all the spectators suddenly crying out in alarm? That was because Long Fei had suddenly turned around and circled one arm around Han Yunxi's waist. He pulled her close and lifted her chin with his other hand before kissing her domineeringly. Han Yunxi was caught off guard, but she didn't struggle. Her arms quickly circled around Long Fei's waist, enjoying his domineering kiss as she responded to him. And as soon as she did, he became even more unbridled as he plundered her. His kiss deepened and grew more intense, treating the hundreds of people around them like air. If this was any other time, Han Yunxi would have avoided it. But she'd long forgotten everything now. She did her best to respond to Long Fei, afraid that he'd think it wasn't enough. Afraid that he'd be dissatisfied, afraid that she'd fail to live up to his passion. Amidst wave after wave of surprised cries, Han Yunxi and Long Fei embraced each other and kissed passionately. They controlled the world and were under the gaze of the world, but in this moment, they'd forgotten all about the world. They only had eyes for each other. They were each other's world. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's elders were all stunned, including Third Elder. They'd lived for so long, but had never seen such a bold move. Just what were these two planning? Even Bailey Qiyu couldn't keep his cool. In his impression, His Highness wasn't an open-minded man, but rather a conservative one. Could it be that he'd been seduced by Han Yunxi? There was only one person in the crowd who didn't look up at the stage, and that was none other than Mu Qingwu. His head was lowered as he stared at his feet. The ones who should be bashful were the two shameless people on the stage, but Mu Qingwu's ears had turned red. He didn't dare to look at the stage. Fortunately, everyone was focused on the stage, or else young General Mu's innocence would become the biggest joke of the 100 Poison Sect battle. Thinking back to those days, how much determination had it taken for him to run around the streets for Mu Luiyue? Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi kissed for a very, very long time. They kissed until they almost couldn't breathe, but Long Fei Yi let go of her. After giving each other some time to breathe, they immediately kissed again. If they continued to kiss, Han Yunxi was afraid that someone would lose control. Fortunately, he still stopped. Long Fei Yi let go of Han Yunxi's lips and pulled her into his arms before turning to face the crowd. This time, everyone immediately quieted down. A man of action never liked to talk nonsense. What he did just now was to tell everyone, especially the Eastern and Western Qin factions, that he was determined to get Han Yunxi. The alliance between the Eastern and Western Qin factions was also inevitable. Bailey Qiyu remained silent until the very end. The other elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium had yet to recover their wits, especially Third Elder. He stood in front of the stage in a daze, as if he'd forgotten what he was here for. Long Fei had no time to waste here. He was about to take Han Yunxi away when a middle-aged man dressed as a soldier suddenly walked out from behind the group of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium elders. This was none other than Ning Cheng's most trusted Deputy General Shui. His armor was quite eye-catching, and the D character on his chest was even more eye-catching. Even if no one recognized him, they could tell that he was a representative of the D clan's military. Your Royal Highness, this soldier refuses to accept the truth that Bai Yanqing gave us. Neither do the Ning clan troops. This soldier earnestly requests that your Royal Highness distinguish between personal feelings and matters of state. Don't mix personal feelings with matters of national vengeance. If you're tricked, you'll lose face for Western Qin's imperial clan. His words were very direct. Soon enough, everyone quieted down. Han Yunxi looked at Deputy General Shui with a complicated look in her eyes. She always knew that the real problem wasn't Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, but the Ning clan troops. Businessmen valued profits, while soldiers valued loyalty. The old foxes in the Council of Elders knew how to judge the situation and know when to advance or retreat. But the Ning clan troops wouldn't compromise so easily. Once Deputy General Shui stepped forward, he'd probably stop fearing her status as a princess. The Ning clan troops obeyed Ning Qing, not her. Han Yunxi guessed right, because Deputy General Shui's next words were very blunt. Long Fei Yi, why did you bring Bai Yanqing down the mountain for a confrontation? Why did you kill him with a single blow? Do you have a guilty conscience? Are you afraid that Bai Yanqing will tell you the truth? You didn't kill Bai Yanqing to silence him, did you? Actually, everyone present could guess that possibility. But almost everyone felt that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had no reason to do so. The enmity between Eastern and Western Qin was their family's grudge. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had once been irreconcilable enemies because of this. How could they join forces to deceive themselves and the rest of the world? They were the ones who wanted revenge, not everyone else. In the end, they were just spectators. Your Royal Highness Princess, you can't let down Western Qin's imperial clan and the D clan's loyalty. Your Royal Highness Princess, you mustn't be fooled by Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi has been using you this entire time. Can't you tell? Your Royal Highness Princess, just what did Bai Yanqing say? You know what's going on in your heart. You have to have a clear conscience. A few of the elders grew agitated as well, throwing caution to the wind to admonish her. Han Yunxi knew things wouldn't go so smoothly, but she always assumed that Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and the D clan's military would question her in private. She never expected the military to challenge her in public. Was this the rhythm of a rebellion? If she insisted on joining forces with Long Fei Yi today, would the Ning clan troops really rebel? If Ning Cheng was here, what would Ning Cheng's attitude be? Perhaps he'd be the same as the military and trade consortium. After all, the military and trade consortium were absolutely obedient to Ning Cheng. Was the D clan going to force her to abdicate in front of everyone? Threatening her? Making her choose between Long Fei Yi and the D clan? Although she felt uneasy, Han Yunxi still replied calmly, "Deputy General Shui, what kind of person do you take this princess for? How could this princess forget about national enmity and family just because of love? Western Qin's imperial clan was destroyed, and this princess was a victim as well. I've been living under someone else's roof since I was a child and suffered all sorts of grievances at the Han estate. I lived in vain for 20 years before I found out about my origins. This princess remembers all of this. If not for the internal strife back then, this princess wouldn't have had to suffer so much. Nor would I be standing here being questioned by a bunch of men like you. Let me tell you, Western Qin's imperial clan's hatred comes from family, but national enmity comes from Western Qin's imperial clan. You're insulting this princess by questioning her like this. You're insulting Western Qin's imperial clan. What right do you have to question this princess? What are your motives?" When it came to the truth, Han Yunxi really was lying. However, at this moment, her indignation was not an act. It was real. The D clan claimed to be loyal to Western Qin's imperial clan, but aside from Myriad Merchant Hall's fifth elder, who else in the D clan was truly loyal to a princess like her? In this dynasty, the relationship between monarch and subjects was like that between generals and soldiers. Absolute obedience was emphasized, and the orders of the monarch couldn't be disobeyed. But how could the D clan act like subjects at all? Compared to Long Fei Ye's control over the East Qin camp, Han Yunxi didn't feel like a princess at all. She felt more like the sole orphan of the imperial clan. Deputy General Shui, this princess hasn't forgotten her enmity, but clearly recognized her enemy. If this princess hadn't figured out the truth today, I would have continued to be incited by others. Eastern and Western Qin would never see another day of peace. As Han Yunxi spoke, she looked at the crowd. Let me ask you, if Eastern and Western Qin will never see another day of peace between them, will Cloud Realm Continent ever see a day of peace? Will the common people ever have a day of peace? Han Yunxi's words were sonorous and forceful without a trace of guilt. As she saw it, the grudges of the past were already in the past. Whether it was individuals or countries, they should all look forward. Rather than cling to past grudges, it was better to live well in the present and plan for the future. Those who lived in the past weren't people who loved peace. In the grand scheme of things, grudges, right and wrong, there was only one standard to judge, whether or not they could bring peace to Cloud Realm Continent. Cloud Realm Continent had always been a single entity that belonged to the Great Qin Empire. Only people with selfish motives would haggle over past grudges and national enmities. The common people didn't care about such things. They only wanted peace, stability, and peace. With such beliefs and perseverance, Han Yunxi looked down at everyone present, calm and collected. Very soon, cheers rose from the crowd. Mu Qinggu had long raised his head to look over, a smile tugging at his lips. Aside from his secret love for Han Yunxi, he admired her even more. It had to be said that Han Yunxi's words had struck a chord with his heart. As a soldier, he'd always believed that the true meaning of protecting the country wasn't hatred, but the peaceful lives of the common people. Too many people used the pretense of protecting the country and maintaining peace as a pretext to start wars, but they were actually seeking power for themselves. In this aspect, Mu Qinggu had clashed with his father many times. Although he'd been lectured and disappointed countless times, he still held fast to his beliefs. Today, hearing the woman he admired speak such righteous words, the admiration in Mu Qinggu's heart quietly turned into worship. Just like how he worshipped Long Feiyi, he now respected Han Yunxi even more. Long Feiyi looked at Han Yunxi in surprise as well. He hugged Han Yunxi tighter to tell her that he agreed with her words. Han Yunxi was both righteous and intelligent. Once she raised the topic to the level of a Cloud Realm peace, Deputy General Xue would only fall into an unjust trap if he kept arguing. Who would have thought that Deputy General Xue would neither argue nor obey? Instead, he bowed and said, "Farewell," before turning around and leaving. As soon as he left, the other deputy generals followed closely behind him, along with the elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. They didn't even bid farewell to Han Yunxi. Watching their backs, Long Feiyi murmured, "The D clan will definitely rebel." A complicated look flitted past Han Yunxi's eyes. The D clan's power was equivalent to the entire Western Qin faction. If they rebelled, wouldn't the world fall into chaos? "I won't be polite," Long Feiyi said. He didn't even need to send a single soldier to deal with the D clan. With Myriad Merchant Hall's current situation, he could easily cut off the D clan's source of income. As long as their source of income was cut off, they'd only be able to last a year at most. "Long Feiyi, no matter what, we can't waste our time with the D clan. Jun Xia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors are both watching us," Han Yunxi said seriously. Chapter 959. How could Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi know that the dead Bai Yanqing was actually still alive? If it was just the D clan's rebellion, it wouldn't have been a big deal to Long Feiyi. Although Han Yunxi had taken care of Myriad Merchant Hall's gambling house and auction house, these two businesses were now in their hands. As long as Long Feiyi's Kengan private bank stopped working with the auction house's business would plummet. As for the gambling house, it had just opened in the few days they'd been at 100 Poison Sect. As long as the inside story of the new casino was leaked, it would basically be ruined. The 700 million taels Myriad Merchant Hall had paid for the deed would basically go down the drain. With Myriad Merchant Hall's current financial resources, they had to bear all kinds of losses to survive the harsh winter while also paying for the D clan's various expenses, especially the Ning clan's. At most, they could only last for a year. Once war broke out, they might not even last a year due to the high cost of military supplies during the winter. When marching to war, rations and fodder came first. Without sufficient military supplies, they would lose half the battle. What could the D clan use to fight Long Feiyi? Han Yunxi understood all of this. However, she was worried about Northern Li and Emperor Kongqing. "Don't worry, Jun Xia and Emperor Kongqing will never make peace. Jun Xia won't be able to send troops south this year." Long Feiyi's grasp of Northern Li's political situation was very precise. In order to protect Little Yi, Helian Zuixiang had already agreed to all of noble consort Zhao's requests and exposed Bai Yanqing and Jun Xia's many years of conspiracy in front of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. The Northern Dynasty's emperors had previously cut off Jun Xia's military pay, so they were sure to make a big move soon. Of course, Jun Xia had another way to get his military pay, and that was to work with the D clan in secret. If it was in the past, the D clan might have had the financial resources to support Jun Xia. But now, the D clan could hardly even protect themselves. In a sense, Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi still had to thank Gu. If not for Gu sacrificing Golden Wing Palace's interests, messing up the three-way black market's casino and Myriad Merchant Hall's auction, they might not have been able to completely control the D clan's financial resources. After hearing Long Fei Ye's words, Han Yunxi came to her senses. How could she forget that when she was still in the D clan's army, Long Fei Yi had already held Northernly in check? He had enough military strength and financial resources to contend with the D clan. At that time, the D clan had been defeated and lost many cities. The reason Long Fei Yi took the initiative to make peace was all for her sake. Now, if the D clan rebelled, it would not be good in terms of military strength or public opinion. Why would the D clan do this? If they wanted to be loyal to Western Qin, shouldn't loyalty to Western Qin begin with loyalty to her, the princess? Long Fei Yi, is there any other way? If the two armies go to war, it will be a waste of manpower and resources, Han Yunxi asked in a low voice. Long Fei Yi chuckled. Fool, if you and I join hands, the D clan will completely become our subordinates. How could they be willing to accept that? These words enlightened Han Yunxi. It turned out that not believing the truth was just an excuse. The D clan was worried that if she joined hands with Long Fei Yi, the D clan would be suppressed forever and might even be swallowed up by the East Qin camp. Therefore, even though they knew they could not resist, they would still fight to the end. Han Yunxi smiled. So, they are worried that I can't win against you and Western Qin will be controlled by him in the end? If the two of you join hands, I won't touch a single one of your soldiers, Long Fei Yi said simply. He had always given Han Yunxi, not demanded. I believe you, but they won't. Han Yunxi was a little helpless. Perhaps I should go back to three-way black market and do my best to make an issue out of Myriad Merchant Hall to avoid a war. Myriad Merchant Hall's elders were much cleverer than Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's elders and Deputy General Shui. If the two sides worked together smoothly, they could make a move against Jun Yixia immediately. If things didn't go well, he didn't know how things would develop. Long Fei Yi, give me a bit more time, Han Yunxi murmured. In the end, she still didn't have full control over the D clan. Everyone present was still waiting. Everyone present was a reputable figure and no fool, so they could tell that the Western Qin camp was at odds with each other. Many of them had been hoping to see a fight break out, but the D clan's representatives had already left. If the Western Qin camp was at odds with each other, then the cooperation between Western Qin and East Qin wouldn't go smoothly. There was bound to be a good show in the coming days. Many busybodies were looking forward to it. Young General, I'm afraid the D clan has ulterior motives, Mu Qingwu's guard murmured. Mu Qingwu glanced at him but didn't say anything. Like Long Tianma, he couldn't figure out why his father had gotten involved in the 100 Poison sect battle this time. Father had borrowed Emperor Kong Chang's hand to stir up such a scene. Why? Everything here was basically over, but he couldn't figure out anything. Actually, as he saw it, the enmity between Western Qin and Eastern Qin wasn't unresolvable. Even without exposing the Wind Clan's instigation, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi could sit down and negotiate a deal. Why couldn't they just bury the hatchet with a smile? The reason why the enmity had persisted to this day was because of the conflict of interest and the struggle for power behind it. Back then, the Great Qin Empire was ruled by two emperors, East and West, so there were all kinds of hidden conflicts. Otherwise, how could they have been so easily instigated? How could they have started a civil war over a flood? Behind all these enmity was an old saying, a mountain cannot hold two tigers. If not for Han Yunxi and Long Fei Ye's deep relationship, their reconciliation, and the resolution of today's misunderstanding, would the Eastern, Western Qin and Eastern Qin really cooperate sincerely? Wouldn't they continue to fight to the death for territory and power just like before? What enmity, what national enmity, what family hatred? In the end, they were all just excuses. This wasn't a personal matter between Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi, but a matter between the two camps. In Mu Qingwu's opinion, the 100 Poison Sect incident was enough to affect the overall situation. It wasn't the truth that had been revealed and the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin had been resolved, but Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi had mended their old friendship and truly joined forces. Therefore, he was very glad that Long Feiyi had full control over the East Qin camp. Otherwise, the East Qin camp would also have internal strife. Who knew how chaotic this matter would be? At this moment, Long Feiyi was looking at Bailey Qiyu on the stage. He asked coldly, "Bailey Qiyu, the D clan has many problems. What about your Bai clan?" Bailey Qiyu was on the verge of tears. He thought that as long as he didn't say anything, it would be fine. He could let his father argue with His Highness when he returned. Who knew that His Highness would call him out in public? How should he answer? If he supported it, what could his father say when he returned? He had come today as a representative of the Bai clan. If he opposed it, he wouldn't have the guts to challenge His Highness in front of the entire world no matter how much he wanted to. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on Bailey Qiyu, but he didn't have time to think. He could only bow respectfully with his hands clasped in front. "Everything will be done as your Highness says." Now this is how a subordinate should act. In comparison, Han Yunxi felt that her Western Qin princess title was nothing more than a title in name. Hurry back to the army and discuss the grand plan. We'll head north to fight against Juni Xia. Long Feiyi's words ended the battle at 100 Poison Sect. Not only did it incite discussion and suspicion amongst the crowd, but it also shook the calm surface of Cloud Realm continent. Various factions began to secretly prepare for war. Once Long Feiyi headed north to fight against Juni Xia, the true battle of Cloud Realm continent would begin. Once they were out of sight, Long Feiyi took Han Yunxi's hand and pressed it against his lips. Smiling, he muttered to himself, "Long Feiyi's wife." Han Yunxi was magnanimous in front of the crowd, but she was a little embarrassed in front of this guy. She withdrew her hand and prepared to speak when a few shadow guards brought Gu Beiyue over. "Princess, is Bai Yanqing really dead?" Gu Beiyue had been listening from the sidelines. He couldn't believe that Bai Yanqing had died just like that. "I stabbed him in the heart and confirmed that he stopped breathing. I kicked his body into the abyss behind the mountains," Long Feiyi said. Gu Beiyue finally believed him, but his brows furrowed. He seemed uneasy about today's events, but since things had already come to this, he closed his eyes without a word. He had rushed here to meet them for another important matter. "Princess, do you have any news of Lil Thing?" Gu Beiyue asked anxiously. Han Yunxi had been thinking about this as well. She shook her head. If Lil Thing was trapped by Bai Yanqing, would the poison storage space have shattered after Bai Yanqing's death? She really didn't know much about the poison storage space. She didn't control it, but felt like she was being controlled by it instead. She was being forced to cultivate step by step, so she didn't have much control over it. Gu Beiyue didn't know much about the poison storage space either, so he analyzed carefully. "Princess, if the poison storage space had shattered, Lil Thing would have come looking for you already. The only thing in the world that could trap Lil Thing was the poison storage space." Although they hadn't gotten any confirmation from Bai Yanqing, there was an 80 to 90% chance that Lil Thing was trapped in the space. If Lil Thing was in the same mountain, it would be able to find Han Yunxi immediately once it was free. Therefore, after analyzing it this way, Bai Yanqing's poison storage space hadn't shattered. "You mean, Bai Yanqing's poison storage space hasn't shattered?" Han Yunxi was shocked. "He's dead, but the poison storage space hasn't shattered. Could it be that Bai Yanqing's soul was still in the poison storage space even after his physical body died, maintaining the space?" Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi felt goosebumps rise on her hands. What kind of space was the poison storage space? Did it have anything to do with her soul transmigrating here? Long Fei Yi looked at her with a serious expression, his eyes so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. Gu Beiyue was also very surprised. He hesitated for a moment, then suggested, "Your Highness, Princess, why don't we take a look at the body first before we discuss?" Long Fei Yi didn't object. The three of them waited for the shadow guard for a while before rushing to the cliff at the back of the mountain. They quickly reached the cliff. Bai Yanqing's blood had already dried and spilled all over the cliff. There were many poisons that the detoxification system didn't record. Although the detoxification system couldn't analyze them, it would still alert Han Yunxi that something was wrong. If it wasn't for the fact that they were in 100 Poison Sect, which was filled with poisonous plants and animals, Han Yunxi might have noticed Bai Yanqing's blood. After killing Bai Yanqing, Han Yunxi couldn't stand the incessant notifications and turned off the detoxification system. Long Fei Yi carried Han Yunxi while the shadow guard carried Gu Beiyue. The group quickly flew down the cliff and into the abyss. Chapter 960. Long Fei Yi landed first with Han Yunxi. This abyss was much deeper than they had imagined. It was like a deep ravine with a small stream flowing through it. The vegetation was lush and covered the sky. It was very cool and even the air was humid. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi looked around but did not see Bai Yanqing's body. They did not notice anything strange. After all, Long Fei Yi had stabbed Bai Yanqing in the heart personally. Moreover, after Bai Yanqing fell off the cliff, his body was hanging on a tree. Long Fei Yi had personally checked his breathing. After confirming that he was dead, he kicked the body down the abyss. Even if he was still gasping for his last breath, how could he not die after falling from such a high place? Perhaps even his body could not be preserved. They only thought that the body was nearby and were not in a hurry to look for it. Instead, they waited for the shadow guard to bring Gu Beiyue down. Han Yunxi was not in a good mood, especially in this abyss. Her depressed mood was written all over her face. Long Fei Yi had already noticed it. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry. You didn't kill him." He knew that what she could not let go of was the word patricide. At that time, even he did not expect that Bai Yanqing would say something like that and acknowledge his daughter at that time. Perhaps Han Yunxi could no longer stay calm from then on. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi and asked, "I told you to kill him, right?" She was indeed not calm at that time and could not think. Now that she thought about it, she forgot what she said to Long Fei Yi at that time. Long Fei Yi remembered very clearly that when Bai Yanqing acknowledged his daughter, Han Yunxi was stunned for a long time. In the end, she said to him, "I only trust you in this world. What are you hesitating for?" She did not have the heart to kill her father. She refused to admit that she had a father like Bai Yanqing. Long Fei Yi held her hand tightly. "Han Yunxi, you just have to remember that you didn't kill him. I killed him. Back then, the Wind Clan joined forces with the Black Clan and the D Clan to destroy my East Qin. I have to settle this debt." Back then, the East and West Qin had a grudge. However, the Black Clan was the one who truly destroyed the Western Qin royal family and the Wind was the East Qin royal family. Today, even if Han Yunxi did not make up her mind, Long Fei Yi would not show mercy. Han Yunxi then looked up at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi said again, "Bai Yanqing is not your father. You are not the Han Yunxi of the Han family." "No. He is." Before Han Yunxi could finish, Long Fei Yi interrupted her. He said, "Why did Madame Tianxin hide her identity and marry into the Han family? Why did she have a difficult birth? Bai Yanqing clearly knows your identity, but he still refuses to acknowledge you. Don't you think this is too strange? He acknowledged you as his daughter at a time of life and death. Do you really believe his words? Although Long Fei Ye's words were comforting, they were not without reason. Han Yunxi looked at him as if she wanted to say something. However, in the end, she did not say anything. She was reflecting if she had been too impulsive. With Bai Yanqing dead, who would know about Madame Tianqin's past? What if Bai Yanqing was not her father? Then who was her father? Was he alive or dead? Where could she find out? Han Yunxi was silent. Long Fei Yi did not say anything either. He held her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. Actually, words were the most powerless. A hug or a tight grip was actually more reassuring. They waited for a while before the shadow guard brought Gu Beiyue down. Have you found the body? Gu Beiyue asked seriously. We were waiting for you. The body should be nearby. Let's split up and search, Long Fei Yi said calmly. Gu Beiyue only needed to glance at Han Yunxi to know that something was wrong with her emotions. A faint smile flitted across his lips. Long Fei Yi was not waiting for him. He was clearly giving Han Yunxi time to calm down. It had to be said that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's actions regarding the 100 Poison Sect incident were rather impulsive. Gu Beiyue did not say much. Although they had been impulsive today, there was no better way. Judging from the way Bai Yanqing had waited at the foot of the mountain for so long, no matter what the truth between East and Western Qin was, Bai Yanqing would definitely sow discord in front of everyone. Cloud Realm situation had developed to this point. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had reached this point. If they didn't use this opportunity to find a reason to cooperate, what would happen between East and Western Qin after Bai Yanqing's death? Very soon, they split up to search for Bai Yanqing's body. However, when they walked around the area, they all panicked. Bai Yanqing's body was nowhere to be seen, including in the shallow stream. Only a pool of blood could be seen not far away. Your Highness, are you sure Bai Yanqing is dead? Gu Beiyue's originally pale face was now so pale that there was no trace of blood. If Bai Yanqing wasn't dead, then the situation was serious. However, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's expressions were even uglier. Long Fei Yi said seriously, I personally checked his breathing. He's no longer breathing. A sword to the heart. At this point, Long Fei Yi seemed to have thought of something and stopped abruptly. Hadn't there once been a person who had been stabbed in the heart with a dagger? Hadn't that person also lived well? Seeing Long Fei Ye's strange behavior, Gu Beiyue asked anxiously, what's going on? After confirming that he's dead, let's search again. Even though Long Fei Yi was facing Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue, he didn't reveal Gu's secret. All right. Gu Beiyue didn't pursue the matter. They went south and north respectively, searching almost the entire deep stream. It wasn't until the next morning that they reunited at the same spot. Could the body have been stolen? Han Yunxi could only think of this possibility. She saw with her own eyes that Bai Yanqing's heart had been stabbed. Moreover, it wasn't caused by sword qi, but by the profound frost sword. How could he have survived in such a situation? Next, Long Fei checked Bai Yanqing's breathing. As she saw it, he was being exceedingly cautious and even superfluous. The possibility of the body being stolen isn't high. Gu Beiyue said seriously. In 100 Poison Sect, other than Bai Yanqing and Jun Yixia who were highly skilled in martial arts, everyone else had one with poison. Even that girl Bai Yuqiao's martial arts were average. Almost no one in 100 Poison Sect could go down such a deep abyss. Moreover, Shi Jiuxia had surrendered to Han Yunxi on the spot. Who else in 100 Poison sect would take such a risk to search for Bai Yanqing's body? Since he was already dead, it was useless even if they found it. Could it have been bitten by a poisonous beast? Han Yunqi asked again. However, when she said this, even she herself felt that it was untenable. Poisonous beasts that ate corpses were extremely rare. Even if they did, they would have left traces whether they killed the body on the spot or dragged it away. But besides a pool of blood, they didn't find any other traces. The three of them fell silent. Actually, they all had the same worry, but they didn't say it out loud. In the end, it was Gu Beiyue who spoke up first. Your Highness, Princess, Bai Yanqing might have faked his death. But he clearly, Han Yunqi was about to retort, but Long Feiyi cut her off. Have you heard of the poison sect's poison Gu humans? Back when he found out that Gu hadn't died after being stabbed in his heart, he had been investigating the reason. The poison sect had been caught by Medical City because of their research on poison Gu humans. In the end, the entire sect was destroyed. Rumor had it that the method to raise poison Gu humans hadn't been successful, and Gu's father, Academy head Gu, had been secretly researching the secret recipe for raising poison Gu humans all this time. But did any of the poison sect's direct descendants succeed in researching the secret recipe? Did the poison sect's direct descendant gain control of the recipe and succeed? Who could say for sure? Who could guarantee it? Long Feiyi hadn't believed it at first, but Gu's appearance changed his mind. Gu Yuntian's secret had been exposed at Medical City's medical skills competition. Although he'd been secretly researching the poison sect's secret arts all this time, it seemed that he hadn't succeeded in his research based on what he'd found in the underground chamber. It seemed that Gu hadn't been raised into a poison Gu human by Gu Yuntian. But Gu's immortality was an ironclad fact. So why hadn't Gu died? Gu was familiar with everything about the poison sect. Could he have used other means to raise himself into a poison Gu human? At this time, Long Feiyi didn't have time to think about Gu. He only knew that immortals did exist in this world. When he killed Bai Yanqing, he hadn't considered that possibility at all. Time had been tight. First, the mercenaries and poison guards couldn't hold on for long. If they delayed any longer, sure Jiuxia wouldn't be the only one coming. The more people knew about this, the more troublesome it would be. Second, Bailey Mingxiang had also been poisoned, leaving Han Yunqi limited time to treat the poison. Third, the people at the foot of the mountain couldn't wait for long. Now that he thought about it carefully, Bai Yanqing was a direct descendant of the poison sect. If he hadn't died after being struck, he had to be a poison Gu human. Poison Gu human. Gu Beiyue broke out in cold sweat. Han Yunqi's face was deathly pale, and she didn't speak for a long time. The two of them had only just realized what was going on. Poison Gu human was enough to explain the strange disappearance of the corpse. Bai Yanqing wasn't dead, so they were in big trouble. Bai Yanqing had an immortal body, so they were in even bigger trouble. Long Feiyi was the calmest of the three. He asked seriously, what exactly is a poison Gu human? There were many legends about poison Gu humans. Some said they were immortal, indestructible, and immortal. Others said they were invulnerable to weapons and poisons. There were even some who said that poison Gu humans were the evolved form of poison corpses and could be controlled by their masters. Gu Beiyue shook his head, and so did Han Yunqi. The poison Gu man was a legend of the poison sect to begin with. Forget them, even the elders of Medical City might not have a definite answer. A complicated look flitted through Long Feiyi's eyes. It looked like he still had to meet Gu again, even though he didn't want to see that untrustworthy fellow ever again. Is there a way to kill a poison Gu human? Long Feiyi asked again. Your Highness, the problem at hand isn't how to kill Bai Yanqing, but how to stop him. Gu Beiyue said seriously. Once he shows up, everything we said today will be overturned. Han Yunxi was worried about this as well. Bai Yanqing only needed to show up and he didn't need to say anything to overturn everything she and Long Feiyi had said today. No matter what the world thought, the Eastern, Western Qin and Eastern Qin factions would definitely be dissatisfied. Forget her, even Long Feiyi would find it hard to convince the masses. Your Highness, today's matter lacked consideration. Gu Beiyue didn't want to say much at first, but since Bai Yanqing wasn't dead, he had no choice but to say it. Gu Beiyue and Han Yunxi were worried that Bai Yanqing would expose their lies today, but Long Feiyi wasn't as worried. He looked at Han Yunxi and asked, "Do you regret it?" Chapter 961. Regret. Han Yunxi's first reaction was to shake her head. She had made this decision at the three-way black market and had persisted until now. Although it seemed like a wrong decision now, she did not regret it. She did not want to regret it. When she first learned about Long Feiyi's childhood, she made this decision. She only had one thought, and that was to stand side by side with Long Feiyi, hand in hand, and be together openly. This man's literary and military skills were unparalleled. This man's lofty ambitions were also unparalleled. This man had suffered unimaginable hardships as he grew up. She loved him, respected him, and felt sorry for him. This kind of person should not be bound by hatred. He should not live for East Qin, he should live for himself. Whether it was his ideals or his ambitions, he had the right to go further and fly higher. She did not want the hatred between East and West Qin to drag him down. She did not want him to give in again and again because of her. She wanted to be his support, not his stumbling block. In the current situation, the battle at 100 Poison Sect was their best opportunity. If they missed this opportunity, she did not know how long they would have to wait. Perhaps after leaving 100 Poison Sect, they would have to go their separate ways. Seeing Han Yunxi shake her head, Long Feiyi seemed to feel that it was not enough. He looked at Han Yunxi and asked seriously, "Answer me." Han Yunxi threw caution to the wind and said loudly, "I won't regret it. East and West Qin have no grudges. There will never be hatred between us." Wasn't that what Long Feiyi had been waiting for? He pulled Han Yunxi into his arms and hugged her tightly before letting go. As long as she did not regret it, it was enough. What kind of mess could he not clean up after her? Now that Gu Beiyue had returned, even Bai Yanqing could not stir up the world that he was determined to conquer. Long Feiyi said, "We don't need the truth, we just need an opportunity to cooperate. The world is full of people, and everyone has their own opinions about what is right and wrong. Even if Bai Yanqing shows up and exposes everything we did today, so what? Not everyone in the world would believe what he said." After Long Feiyi finished speaking, he turned around and instructed the Shadow Guard, "Pass down the order. Spread the news that Bai Yanqing escaped by faking his death after being stabbed in the heart." As soon as Long Feiyi said this, Gu Beiyue, who had been tense all this time, suddenly relaxed and smiled. In the end, he was still inferior to Long Fei when it came to scheming. Long Feiyi's preemptive strike had caught Bai Yanqing off guard. If they waited until Bai Yanqing showed up to explain everything that had happened today, the world would definitely not believe them. However, if they made the first move and released the news that Bai Yanqing had faked his death, the public would still support them more when Bai Yanqing appeared again. Moreover, Long Fei's declaration of "the sword and the heart won't die" would probably shake all of Cloud Realm continent. Bai Yanqing's background as a descendant of the Poison Sect would definitely make the world think of the legendary Poison Gu humans. The Poison Sect was already viewed as a public enemy when they researched the secret recipes for Poison Gu humans, much less Bai Yanqing. No matter whether he was really a poison goo human or not, the world would dread him and view him as an enemy. No one would believe him so easily. Han Yunqi's heart also settled back into her chest. She had to admit that Long Fei Ye's move was ruthless and ruthless. She could already imagine how much Cloud Realm continent would stir up once the news got out. As the poison sect head, she had to fan the flames a bit. Send orders to the poison sect to remove Bai Yanqing from the list of direct descendants, Han Yunqi instructed. The guard hesitated before asking, "Princess, that's all. That's all. There's no need to say anything else. Leave it to the world to guess." Han Yunqi's gloomy mood suddenly brightened. Now it looked like she didn't need to bear the crime of patricide. Bai Yanqing and she were both direct descendants of the poison sect, so naturally there would be people who would suspect their relationship. If she used her status as sect head to remove Bai Yanqing's name now, she could prevent Bai Yanqing's notoriety from affecting the poison sect that had just been rehabilitated. Secondly, if Bai Yanqing came to acknowledge his daughter, she could interrogate him properly. If necessary, she didn't mind placing righteousness before family and cutting ties with Bai Yanqing in front of the world. "Your Highness, Princess, the most important thing right now is to stabilize the D clan and find a way to neutralize the poison goo humans. Since there's a secret art to nurture them, there must be a secret art to neutralize it," Gu Baiyue said seriously. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi both agreed on these points. After weighing the pros and cons, finding a way to neutralize the poison goo humans was even more urgent than stabilizing the D clan. Before, they hadn't known that Bai Yanqing was a poison goo human, so they hadn't sensed the threat. Now that they knew the truth, they still felt lingering fear. In truth, even if they joined forces, they still wouldn't be a match for Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing must have hidden his true strength because he had his own misgivings and didn't want to become public enemy number one. Everyone in this world yearned to be immortal and live forever. But who wouldn't be afraid when an unkillable monster like that appeared? Who wouldn't want to destroy such a monster? Even the major factions would do everything in their power to destroy it if they couldn't control it. A monster like this not only threatened the safety of the common people, but also the rule of the various major factions. As for the D clan, let's have Kangon Private Bank put some pressure on them first, Long Fei Yi said. Although the myriad merchant hall elders didn't know that Kangon Private Bank belonged to Long Fei Yi's faction, they all knew that it had close ties with Han Yunqi. As long as Kangon Private Bank put pressure on the auction houses, the myriad merchant hall elders would understand that Han Yunqi was planning to make a move against the D clan's treasury. They only had two choices: help Han Yunqi convince Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and the Ning clan troops, or join forces with the Consortium and the Ning clan troops to resist Han Yunqi. There were many factions within the D clan as well. If they wanted to control them, they had to sound them out first before making any plans. All right, Han Yunqi nodded. She wanted to test the strength of the D clan's support for peace. There was still no news of Ning Qing being kidnapped by Bai Yuqiao. If Ning Qing was here, things would be much simpler. The most direct and effective way to control the D clan was through Ning Qing. Actually, she didn't have such a strong desire for control. Instead, she hoped that Ning Qing could set aside his years of obsession and join forces with Long Fei Yi to deal with the Wind clan. Back then, Ning Qing had abandoned commerce for the army and started as a small soldier. It hadn't been easy for him to build such a large army. The D clan was a family of merchants who had been doing business for generations. What they needed most was peace and prosperity. Han Yunqi had always thought that if Ning Qing hadn't joined the army and the D clan hadn't put so much thought into military affairs, perhaps Kangon Private Bank wouldn't be Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's biggest bank today. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's businesses wouldn't have been destroyed so easily by Long Fei Yi either. The fatal flaw of the Ning clan troops was that Ning Qing had been getting very little money from the national treasury over the years. He was using Cloud Realm Trade Consortium to support the Ning clan troops. As long as Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's finances were in trouble, the entire D clan would be in trouble as well. Although Long Fei was a rich man, the Bailey Navy had been raised by the Tianning Imperial Court. Moreover, they continued to do so until Tianning fell into civil strife and Emperor Tianhui fell from power. Meanwhile, Long Fei rarely supported the troops in the south with their salaries. Most of them were raised by the powerful families and financial groups of the south. Long Fei had the ability to balance out the checks and balances between the aristocratic families and financial groups, so he didn't have to submit to anyone's whims. Even if the Bailey army was dissatisfied with Long Fei, the aristocratic families and financial groups of the south would still support Long Fei. The only problem between the aristocratic families and Long Fei now lay with her. Still, it wasn't to the point of falling out. Last time, when she'd met with difficulties at the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, the aristocratic family heads had only targeted her. They didn't dare to touch Long Fei. The southern families and financial groups simply wanted to marry off their daughters to Long Fei, but that was still a long way off. At the very least, they still had to rely on Long Fei to conquer the world and rely on the Long Fei to provide them with all sorts of favorable conditions. They didn't dare to challenge Long Fei yet. If the Bailey army rebelled, Long Fei still had the southern armies. The Bai clan would cling to the grudges between eastern and western Qin, but the aristocratic families and financial groups of the south wouldn't. What they wanted was tangible benefits. Compared to Long Fei, Ning Qing lost because he didn't spread out the risks. The D clan had succeeded because of wealth, so it was likely that they'd lose because of it too. They didn't even need to use a single soldier to keep the D clan in check. All they needed to do was keep Myriad Merchant Hall in check. They'd probe the D clan first while putting the poison goo humans at the top of their list. But that wasn't an easy task. How were they supposed to understand a monster like that? Let's take a trip to the poison sect's forbidden grounds, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Han Yunxi thought for a moment before she suddenly exclaimed, the poison sect's sacrificial altar, the wordless steel. Back in the poison sect's forbidden grounds, she'd accidentally stumbled upon the poison sect's sacrificial altar and seen an ancient and mysterious wordless steel. Later on, she'd dreamed of that place. In her dreams, she'd seen words appear on the steel, which recorded the cultivation methods of the poison storage space. But there were so many words that she couldn't read them all. She only remembered that there were 3 levels to the poison storage space and how to cultivate them. Would there be an introduction to the poison goo humans on the steel? Or perhaps some other secret of the poison sect? Or perhaps, they could find some clues from the sacrificial altar. Han Yunxi didn't believe that Bai Yanqing had created the poison goo human secret on his own. He must have discovered something in the poison sect's forbidden grounds and obtained some sort of inheritance. Han Yunxi told Long Fei and Gu Beiyue about this. Long Fei immediately decided, we'll head to the poison sect's forbidden grounds immediately. Gu Beiyue nodded. It was about time for him to make a trip back to Medical City. I'm afraid the little thing is still with Bai Yanqing, Han Yunxi sighed. It would have been better if she hadn't brought it up, but now that she did, she missed the little fellow dearly. Gu Beiyue's gaze softened. He missed it too. That day, Han Yunxi met with Shi Jiuxia and arranged for a few poison guards and mercenaries to be stationed at 100 Poison Sect. At the same time, she inquired about Bai Yuqiao's whereabouts. Shi Jiuxia had received Bai Yuqiao's letter, but it didn't reveal her whereabouts. Han Yunxi gave Shi Jiuxia a year's time to reform 100 Poison Sect and give up on the trade of poisons. She told him to think of a way out for 100 Poison Sect himself. She also said that if 100 Poison Sect didn't turn over a new leaf after a year, she would disband it. After settling matters with 100 Poison Sect, Han Yunxi and the others set off for Medical City in secret. Before Long Feiyi boarded the carriage, he gave them 3 secret orders. Chapter 962. Long Feiyi's 3 secret orders were as follows: warn Gu that he would suffer the consequences if he didn't come to see him, order Bailey Mingxiang to change their route and wait in Medical City, keep a close eye on all the routes from 100 Poison Sect to Northernly, in case Bai Yanqing went north to seek refuge with Jun Yixia. Medical City was northeast of 100 Poison Sect, and was where 100 Poison Sect would pass on their way to the Land of 3 Roads. Long Feiyi had been very cautious this time. Bai Yanqing had an undying body. If he wanted to take revenge, Long Feiyi wouldn't be able to deal with him, no matter how strong his martial arts were. Thus, Long Feiyi eliminated 5 teams of Shadow Guard and disguised them as 100 Poison Sect members, heading in different directions. Meanwhile, he, Han Yunxi, and Gu Beiyue only took a few poison guards with them. They entered the deep mountains and forests of Western Zhou's eastern region and secretly headed for the Poison Sect. At the very least, their mission at 100 Poison Sect had been a success. Disregarding everything else, discovering Bai Yanqing's undying body was their greatest reward. It was hard to imagine what would have happened if they hadn't known about Bai Yanqing's secret. Bai Yanqing must have never imagined that Long Feiyi would purposely go down the abyss after kicking his corpse into it. At this very moment, Bai Yanqing was heading west. He had no intention of going to Northernly to seek refuge with Jun Yixia. West? Where was he going? Only he himself knew. After Long Feiyi's group left, news that Bai Yanqing was a poison goo human spread quickly. Emperor Kong Qing and Long Tianma were still in Great Central County when they heard the news. Even Mu Qinggu was scared out of his wits, to say nothing of the 2 of them. Poison goo human. How is that possible? Emperor Kong Qing had been restless all afternoon. Long Tianma was silent, but his expression wasn't any better. Long Tianma didn't say anything. As a subordinate, Mu Qinggu couldn't be too unruly in front of outsiders. He was also silent. Emperor Kong Qing had just sat down when he stood up again. Could this be a scheme by Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi? Tell me, how is this possible? Wasn't the Poison Sect destroyed by Medical City back then? They have no reason to make up such a rumor, Long Tianma said lightly. What are you afraid of? Bai Yanqing has no enmity with you or me. Even if the sky collapses, we still have Eastern, Western Qin, and Northernly to support us. Emperor Kong Qing disagreed with Long Tianma's opinion. You can't say that. If Bai Yanqing really is a poison goo human, then wouldn't the world be his sooner or later? A poison corpse was enough to fight against dozens of soldiers, wouldn't a poison goo human be even more so? If Eastern, Western Qin, and Northernly are destroyed, we won't be able to protect them either. Let's just wait and see. In truth, Long Tianma was also somewhat apprehensive. At this point, he no longer had much ambition. He only wanted to protect his little piece of land in Tianan, avoid war, and live in a corner. He'd only recently discovered that General Mu's ambitions weren't small. However, he still didn't understand why General Mu wanted to make such a big deal out of 100 Poison Sect. This morning, Emperor Kong Qing had probed him many times, but he'd only brushed him off half-heartedly. In the end, Emperor Kong Qing hadn't brought up the matter until news of the poison goo human arrived. It's getting late. We must take our leave. Long Tianmo rose to his feet. Emperor Kong Qing didn't linger. After saying a few words of farewell, he walked Long Tianma to his residence. Long Tianma was about to board his carriage when he suddenly remembered something. He smiled. Since Western Zhou and Tianan are going to advance and retreat together, why don't we continue our marriage ties? Emperor Kongqing was overjoyed. Long Tianma only had one empress and no children. When he said marriage ties, he meant that he wanted Western Zhou's princess to be married off to Tianan. Excellent. Excellent. Emperor Kongqing nodded with a smile. Having a princess in Tianan would serve as an informant. At the same time, it would strengthen the relationship between the two countries. Western Zhou's emperor used to be full of ambition, but after experiencing so many battles, especially against the imperial clans of Eastern and Western Qin, he'd long since retreated. His thoughts were the same as Long Tianma's. He wanted to live in seclusion and have the country prosper. Western Zhou and Tianan were separated by the forces of Eastern and Western Qin. Neither Western Zhou nor Tianan could surpass the forces of Eastern and Western Qin and face them head-on. Since there was no direct conflict between the two countries, marriage ties were the best way to stabilize their relationship. Western Zhou's princess married off to Tianan wouldn't be ostracized or guarded against. Emperor Kongqing wasn't an easy person to deal with. He'd inquired about the situation of Tianan's empress, Mu Luiyue. Now that he heard Long Tianma's suggestion, he could more or less sniff out the secret struggle between Long Tianma and General Mu's estate. He was certain that Western Zhou's princess would be favored by Tianan. She might even give birth to Tianan's first heir. Emperor Kongqing immediately agreed and promised to marry Western Zhou's Princess Dehe to Long Tianma as his consort. Princess Dehe's full name was Duanmujin. She had just turned 16 and was the daughter of an imperial concubine. She was the youngest princess of Western Zhou and the daughter Emperor Kongqing doted on the most after Duanmuyao. A few years ago, Emperor Kongqing had been waiting for Duanmujin to come of age so that he could marry her off to Chu Tianin to keep the Chu clan in check. He hadn't expected the Chu clan to rebel so quickly. It was rumored that before Duanmuyao was expelled from the imperial clan, she'd suppressed Duanmujin quite a bit. Now that Duanmuyao and the empress were both in trouble, the little princess had become Emperor Kongqing's favorite. Long Tianma didn't know who Duanmujin was, much less what she looked like. He didn't care about any of that. When he returned to the palace this time, he was going to face the selection of consorts. He needed a noble consort who could suppress Mu Luiyue. Since General Mu wanted to cooperate with Western Zhou, a Western Zhou princess was the perfect candidate. Long Tianma and Emperor Kongqing's meeting went smoothly. Both of them were delighted and exchanged a few more words in low voices before parting. Mu Qinggu stood behind Long Tianma. His heart was heavy as he listened to the marriage proposal. Luiyue had already caused quite a ruckus in the palace because of the selection. He didn't even dare to report it. If news of the marriage proposal got back, heaven knows what kind of chaos would ensue in Tianan's harem. Mu Qinggu suddenly didn't want to go back, but he had to escort Long Tianma back and ask his father about certain things. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi left, as did Emperor Kongqing and Long Tianma. Everyone else left as well. In less than 3 days, news of Bai Yanqing being a poison goo human spread throughout Cloud Realm continent, leaving everyone in a state of panic. Many of the great clans wrote a joint letter requesting a clear explanation from Medical City. The Medical Academy and the Poison Sect issued a joint statement admitting to the matter and expelling Bai Yanqing from the Poison Sect. Jun Yixia soon learned of the news as well. The secret missive in his hand fell to the ground as he fell to his knees. His master had chosen to return to the 100 Poison Sect instead of coming to Sky River to find him, which was already a disappointment. He never expected Bai Yanqing to tell him the truth about the great Qin Empire, or that Bai Yanqing had already turned him into a poison goo human. He had studied poisons with Bai Yanqing and asked him more than once about the poison sex poison goo human secret arts. Every time, Bai Yanqing's reply was, I don't know. Just what was Bai Yanqing planning to do by hiding it so deeply? He'd called Bai Yanqing master for so many years, but Bai Yanqing had no feelings for him at all. Poison goo human, what a poison goo human. Very good, very good. As he muttered to himself, he suddenly raised his head and roared, Bai Yanqing. You lied to me. The resentment in his heart finally exploded. Zhu Nixie was so angry that his eyes turned red. Bai Yanqing, my black clan will break all ties with you. We're irreconcilable. Zhu Nixie spent an entire night calming himself down and convincing himself to forget about their master and disciple relationship. No matter what Bai Yanqing wanted to do, they would be enemies if they ever met again. At daybreak, Zhu Nixie went to find Ning Qing. After all, he had more important matters to attend to. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had reconciled, but how could Eastern and Western Qin still be allies? It was as if they had become a family. He'd like to ask Ning Qing what he thought of the matter. When Long Tianma came over, Ning Qing had just woken up. There were wine jars all over the floor and the air was still filled with the smell of alcohol. Of course, those wine jars were military wine and not the ones Bai Yuqiao bought. What's the matter? Trying to drown your sorrows with alcohol? Zhu Nixie asked sarcastically. You, the princess of Western Qin, can finally be together with Long Fei Yi. Ning Qing, you're done for. Ning Qing raised his head and looked at him. He was drunk and despondent. He sneered, haven't I been done for a long time? Zhu Nixie suddenly grabbed him by the collar and said angrily, Ning Qing, you said that the world is mine and Han Yunxi is yours. You better get your act together. You want 30,000 war horses, right? I'll give them to you right now. Ning Cheng's dejected eyes flashed, but he still pretended to be dispirited. He pulled Zhu Nixie's hand away, turned around, and fell from the warm couch to the ground. He pointed at Zhu Nixie and laughed drunkenly. Okay, it's settled then. The world is Long Fei Ye's and Han Yunxi's. Han Yunxi's and Long Fei Ye's. Long Fei Ye's. Zhu Nixie was already furious. When he heard this, he became even angrier. He brought a basin of cold water and poured it on Ning Cheng's head without hesitation. Then, he smashed the metal plate on his face. Ning Cheng, wake up. Wake up right now. Ning Qing rubbed his temples, looking as if he had just woken up. He glanced at Zhu Nixie and walked out without saying a word. Stop right there. Zhu Nixie said coldly. Ning Qing kept walking forward. These days, he and Zhu Nixie were in a deadlock. Zhu Nixie didn't give him any war horses, and he didn't give Zhu Nixie any military pay. Ning Qing, write a letter to Myriad Merchant Hall immediately and have the Ning clan army prepare. I'll give you the 30,000 war horses of Sky River City. Zhu Nixie said generously. Zhu Nixie had just said these words. Ning Qing had been putting on an act all this time to completely dispel his doubts. Zhu Nixie didn't immediately bring up the matter of military pay. In other words, Zhu Nixie had accepted his previous condition. He would only provide military pay if the war horses were successfully controlled by the Ning clan army. Otherwise, there was nothing to talk about. Okay. Ning Qing didn't look back, nor was he happy. Instead, he had a complicated expression. He hadn't been drunk last night. Instead, he had been thinking all night about who he should write to in the D clan. This letter was very difficult to write. Zhu Nixie would definitely keep an eye on it. He pondered for a while and finally thought of someone. This person was Chapter 963. The person Ning Qing was thinking of was none other than Myriad Merchant Hall's fifth elder. Unlike the other elders, fifth elder was absolutely loyal and obedient to Western Qin's imperial clan. Ning Qing couldn't guarantee what the letter would do once it reached fifth elder's hands, but he believed it would be better in his hands than in anyone else's. At the very least, fifth elder wouldn't be too rash and impulsive. That way, they could buy some more time. As long as Bai Yuqiao's banknotes reached Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders, everything would be easy to handle. Under Jun Yixie's watchful gaze, Ning Qing quickly picked up his brush. Every word of the letter was difficult to write. Under Jun Yixie's scrutiny, he couldn't reveal the truth of his imprisonment here, nor could he order the D clan to remain loyal to Western Qin and fully cooperate with Han Yunxi. At the same time, he had to create a false impression for Jun Yixie to see so that Jun Yixie would believe he wanted to pit the D clan against Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi. The three main powers of the D clan, Myriad Merchant Hall, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, and the military, were all under his control. He knew the Council of Elders and his deputy generals very well. Leaving aside the fact that Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi had killed Bai Yanqing first, then cleared up the misunderstanding between Eastern and Western Qin, it wasn't entirely convincing. Even if Bai Yanqing claimed in front of the world that the Wind and Black clans were the ones who instigated the civil war in the Great Qin Empire, none of the D clan elders would believe him. They wouldn't want to. They were just as stubborn when it came to vengeance as he was. In truth, if he had not heard Jun Yixie tell him the truth, he would not have believed Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi's suspicions about the civil war in Great Qin. Moreover, these old men were all senior members of the D clan. Their loyalty to the D clan was far greater than their loyalty to the Western Qin royal family. They more or less had their own selfish motives. They hoped that the D clan could become a great contributor to the restoration of the Western Qin Empire. They hoped that the D clan could become the most powerful force in the Western Qin Empire. They even hoped that the D clan could marry into the royal family in order to preserve their status and power. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi have reconciled in public. The D clan's Elders Association must be worried that the D clan will be reduced to Long Feiyi's subordinates. In any case, they must rebel. Under such circumstances, if Myriad Merchant Hall hadn't received his banknotes, they wouldn't know the truth. Then, once Jun Yixie's 30,000 warhorses fell into their hands, they would definitely throw caution to the wind and start a war without caring about the consequences. Ning Qing held the brush. After thinking for a while, he wrote a line of words, receive 30,000 warhorses from the Milky Way. Wait for orders. Prepare 500 million soldiers pay at Prosperous Heaven Bank, Northernly Branch. Wait for orders. This was the leeway Ning Qing left for himself and the D clan. It was also his greatest effort for Han Yunxi's sake. The matter of the soldiers' pay was to put Jun Yixie's mind at ease. Even if 500 million soldiers' pay was sent to Prosperous Heaven Bank's Northernly Branch, no one would be able to claim it without his appearance. 500 million. Jun Yixie asked with a raised brow. They had agreed on 1 billion. Once the warhorses arrive, pay 500 million upfront. It's enough for you. Our cooperation won't be short. Why are you in such a hurry? Ning Qing asked in return. Indeed, 500 million was enough for Jun Yixie to turn things around. It wasn't easy to see Ning Qing use the soldiers' pay, so he didn't ask for more. Ning Qing put the letter into an envelope. The recipient was Ning Qing, and he decisively wrote Fifth Elder. Jun Yixie took the letter away, leaving behind a sentence, I'll wait for your soldiers' pay. Seeing Jun Yixia walk away, Ning Cheng wiped his face a few times with both hands to wake himself up. Reconcile. He chuckled and muttered to himself, Han Yunshi, whether you and I are friends or foes will depend on heaven's will. If his banknotes reached the D clan before the warhorses, he could be considered to have truly joined forces with Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi. If the warhorses reached the D clan before the banknotes, once the D clan rebelled, he would never be able to clear his name. Ning Cheng stood at the door for a while. Bai Yuqiao hurriedly ran over. Ning Cheng, quickly follow me to the prison cell. Hurry. Bai Yuqiao was burning with anxiety. Ning Cheng lazily glanced at her and turned to enter the room. Bai Yuqiao grabbed him, someone's about to die. Ning Cheng's eyes turned cold. He was about to push him away when Bai Yuqiao said, Su Xiaoyu's about to die. You should go and persuade her. Who knows, you might be able to persuade her. Su Xiaoyu. Ning Cheng was shocked, but he still pushed Bai Yuqiao's hand away. Ning Cheng was still on guard, wondering if this was a trap. Jun Yixia and Bai Yuqiao teamed up to test him. Unexpectedly, Bai Yuqiao said, Ning Cheng, Su Xiaoyu is Han Yunshi's most beloved maidservant. If you want to save her life, Han Yunshi will definitely be grateful to you. Han Yunshi will have a good impression of you. You should quickly go and persuade her. She won't even drink her medicine. With Bai Yuqiao's reason, Ning Cheng naturally strode over. Bai Yuqiao immediately followed and briefly explained the situation to Ning Cheng. In summary, Su Xiaoyu was sick. She hadn't taken her medicine, and now her life was in danger. When they reached the prison cell door, Bai Yuqiao stopped and said, I won't go in. You go in yourself. You can lie to her or coax her, but she will at least believe you. Ning Cheng walked into the prison cell. When he saw Su Xiaoyu, he couldn't help but gasp. Su Xiaoyu was no longer hanging on the torture rack, but placed on the stone bed. Her clothes were torn and her hair was disheveled. Her originally thin body was now completely skin and bones. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her hands were tightly clenched into fists. Even though she was terminally ill, her entire body was still tense. It wasn't clear whether she was nervous or on guard. Her palm-sized face was so pale that it didn't have a trace of blood, but her expression was still stubborn and unyielding. Even someone as heartless as Ning Cheng felt his heart ache when he saw her. He thought that if that woman, Han Yunshi, saw this child like this, her heart would definitely ache. Ning Cheng suddenly realized that in the huge Sky River horse farm, there were so many people, but only this little girl was on the same side as him. Was it because she didn't want to reveal anything and didn't want to become a hostage, so she wanted to die? If there came a day when he couldn't do his best and could only be manipulated by Jun Yixia, would Su Xiaoyu's current situation be his tomorrow? After Ning Cheng confirmed that there was no one around, he bent down. He had never been so gentle in his life. He carefully lifted the hair covering Su Xiaoyu's face and whispered, "Little girl, accompany me for a while. If we die, Big Brother will die with you." Su Xiaoyu didn't move, but Ning Cheng clearly noticed that her long eyelashes were trembling. He lowered his voice, "My name is Ning Cheng, the leader of the D clan." When he said this, Su Xiaoyu immediately opened her eyes. Although she was kidnapped all the way to Sky River City, she didn't have the chance to meet Ning Cheng. But she knew that Ning Cheng was kidnapped like her. Previously in the Black Tower, she also heard the Shadow Guard talk about Ning Cheng. This guy was a loyal follower of the Western Qin royal family, but also an enemy of Long Fei Yi. "Little. Don't call yourself Big Brother, I don't know you." Even if she was so weak that she only had one breath left, Su Xiaoyu's mouth was still so stubborn and sharp. Ning Cheng smiled, at least you're willing to talk to me. Su Xiaoyu quickly noticed Ning Cheng's phoenix feather mask. She only felt that the pattern was very familiar, but she couldn't tell where she had seen it. This is phoenix feather. Even speaking was very laborious. She had seen phoenix feather a long time ago. When Chu Tianyin asked her to infiltrate Han Yunxi's side to see if Han Yunxi had a phoenix feather birthmark, he had given her the pattern. Of course, Su Xiaoyu didn't remember these things, but she knew that the Western Qin princess had a phoenix feather birthmark on her back. Yes. Ning Qing admitted. Your eyes. What happened? Su Xiaoyu asked. I saw something I shouldn't have, so I went blind. Ning Qing actually laughed. Su Xiaoyu was confused, but she didn't have the strength to pursue the matter. She asked, They sent you? Ning Qing couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This girl was really mature and smart. Compared to those adult servant girls, she was several times better. Yes, they sent me to persuade you to take the medicine. Ning Qing admitted again. Su Xiaoyu laughed. In fact, she didn't have the strength to laugh, but her expression was smiling. She asked, You. Based on what? Ning Qing didn't shy away from answering loudly, based on the fact that I like your mistress. He suddenly leaned over to Su Xiaoyu's ear and whispered, Live for another month. If I can't save you, I'll die with you. After Ning Qing finished speaking, he immediately retreated and stood up. Su Xiaoyu only then realized how tall and imposing this man was. She looked at him and actually nodded without anyone noticing. 1 month, no harm. After Ning Qing came out, Bai Yuqiao hurriedly asked, How was it? I coaxed her that I would save her and curry favor with Han Yunxi. She believed me. Ning Qing said indifferently. When he was about to leave, he stopped and said, Remember to give her to me when you're done with the interrogation. Han Yunxi will definitely like such a gift. It had to be said that Ning Cheng's acting was very good. Bai Yuqiao didn't think too much about it. He instructed the soldiers to boil the medicine and personally brought the nurse in to perform the acupuncture. Su Xiaoyu's eyes were wide open and she didn't move. Bai Yuqiao didn't say much to her and just stood at the side and watched. After the nurse took her pulse, she asked Su Xiaoyu to take off her clothes and lay on the stone bed. Su Xiaoyu was so weak that she didn't even have the strength to raise her hand. She didn't move at all. There weren't many maidservants in the army, especially in this place. Bai Yuqiao could only do it himself. She nimbly took off her clothes and flipped her body over. However, she was stunned when she flipped her body over. The nurse began to perform acupuncture on Su Xiaoyu's back. Su Xiaoyu had already closed her eyes. With just a slight movement, she felt that all her strength had been sucked away. She really wanted to sleep. The nurse quickly realized that something was wrong and cried out in alarm, Not good. The nurse hurriedly turned Su Xiaoyu over and desperately pinched her philtrum point. Child, you can't sleep. You can't sleep. Child, wake up. Bai Yuqiao regained her senses and suddenly panicked. What's wrong with her? If she continues to sleep, she will never wake up. Is the medicine ready? If not, bring some sweet soup over first. Hurry. The nurse was extremely anxious. She repeatedly pinched Su Xiaoyu's philtrum a few times and checked her eyelids. This kind of emergency treatment wasn't actually the first time, but this time, Bai Yuqiao's entire face was pale. She stood in the same place, not knowing what to do. Her bean-sized eyes kept rolling down. What's wrong with her? Chapter 964. The female doctor was trying to save Su Xiaoyu, but Bai Yuqiao had lost her usual ability and agility as she moved like the wind. She stood by the side at a loss as bean-sized teardrops kept falling down, and unknowingly, she had already cried till she was in a complete mess. Not knowing how long had passed, the female doctor once again pulled Su Xiaoyu back from the brink of death. Actually, this round Su Xiaoyu was in an extremely dangerous situation, but luckily she didn't resist like the previous few times but was much more obedient, otherwise she really wouldn't be able to be saved. After ascertaining that Su Xiaoyu's life wasn't in any danger, the female doctor then looked towards Bai Yuqiao and was shocked to discover that Bai Yuqiao was in tears. "Young Miss Bai, you. What's wrong?" the female doctor asked timidly. Bai Yuqiao seemed to have gone crazy as she grabbed the female doctor's collar and questioned, "Is she all right?" "I'm telling you, if anything happens to her, you can forget about living." The female doctor was scared and aggrieved. "Young Miss Bai, I. How is she? Tell me." Bai Yuqiao roared angrily. She's not. Her life is no longer in danger, but her illness is still very serious, and her body is also very weak. She needs to be treated slowly nurtured." The female doctor's voice was trembling. She had been in contact with Bai Yuqiao for so long, but she had never seen Bai Yuqiao in such a state, as though she had lost her mind. "Then why are you still in a daze for? Hurry up and treat her." Bai Yuqiao pushed the female doctor aside as she looked left and right in a fluster, not daring to look at Su Xiaoyu. After some time, she then said, This lass is very important. She must be treated well and nurtured well. Whatever medicinal herbs you need, just tell me." After Bai Yuqiao said that, she ran towards the door, and it was until she saw a group of patrolling soldiers walking past the door when she abruptly stopped in her tracks and turned her back to them. It was only then that she calmed down a little. She wiped away the tears on her face and carefully walked into the prison cell. She did not disturb the female doctor. She stood in the dark and quietly watched the female doctor perform acupuncture on Su Xiaoyu. She really wanted to walk over and take a closer look at the tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back, but she didn't dare to. She was brought back by her master from the City of Daughters. She didn't know who her parents were, but she had a younger sister. Other than this, her master didn't tell her anything else. However, she had long been secretly investigating this matter. She had searched through the entire 100 Poisons sect and the entire Great Central County before finally finding the granny who had raised her all those years ago. It was a pity that the nanny didn't know much. The granny said that she had a jade rui tattoo on her back, but it was incomplete, only half of it. The granny speculated that if she had a younger sister, then the other half of the jade rui tattoo should be on her younger sister's back. That year, Bai Yanqing had asked the granny to casually give her a name. Because the granny saw the jade rui tattoo, she gave it the word Yu. Because the granny's surname was Qiao, she gave her the name Bai Yuqiao. Just now, she saw a jade rui tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back. It was only half of it, but it could be pieced together with the one on her back to form a complete jade rui. When a person was young, the tattoo would change shape as they grew up. The jade rui tattoo on her back had already changed shape, but the shape could still be seen. And the tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back had also changed shape. The degree of change was almost the same as the one on her back. This proved that the tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back was also tattooed when she was young. Su Xiaoyu. Su Xiaoyu, Bai Yuqiao muttered to herself. Su Xiaoyu's name also had the word Yu in it. Who gave her this name? Was it also because of the tattoo on her back? In 100 Poisons sect and this army, some of the elders who were familiar with her all called her Yu. Han Yunxi and the others all called Su Xiaoyu Little Yu. She was Big Yu, and Su Xiaoyu was Little Yu. Thinking of this, Bai Yuqiao couldn't control her tears from flowing out. Behind her master's back, she had searched for her biological younger sister for so many years. Her only family in this world had actually been by her side for a long time. But she had been tortured by her for so long. She had been sick, injured, and had almost died on the rack several times. Why was it like this? Since she was young, she had always been clear-minded. She had long seen that her master didn't truly love her, and her senior brother didn't treat her with sincerity. She had lived alone in this world, and had never known what it felt like to have a family member. Now that she had one, why did her heart ache so much? Why was she so afraid? She was finally no longer lonely. She finally had someone she could hug, so shouldn't she be happy? Why did her tears keep falling? Why did she want to wail so much? Bai Yuqiao cried silently wiping away her tears as she propped herself up and stood upright. After the female physician finished the acupuncture, she wrote a prescription and waited for the servant girl to bring the decocted medicine over. She stayed by Su Xiaoyu's side until she regained consciousness and fed her a bowl of medicine. After everything was settled, the female physician then walked towards Bai Yuqiao. Seeing Bai Yuqiao's head lowered and her entire person dimmed, the female physician didn't dare to ask too much. She only said seriously, "Miss Bai, in another 6 hours, I'll come over again to take her pulse and feed her medicine. If she wakes up during this period, the servant girl will feed her some millet porridge." Bai Yuqiao lowered her head and didn't say a word. She only waved her hand to signal the female physician to leave. After the female physician left, the large prison cell became empty and quiet. Only Su Xiaoyu's frail and petite body laid there quietly, giving off an unreal feeling. Bai Yuqiao leaned against the wall and slowly slid down, kneeling on the ground. She buried her face in her hands and very quickly, her entire body started to tremble as she started to cry out. Gradually, the sound became louder and louder as it resounded in the dark and gloomy prison cell. It was extremely miserable. Su Xiaoyu slowly opened her eyes. In actual fact, she wasn't unconscious after being fed the medicine. She was just too tired and didn't want to move. She was afraid that Bai Yuqiao would know that she wasn't unconscious and would come over to ask her what Ning Qing had said to her. Su Xiaoyu laid there and didn't dare to move. She looked at her surroundings and in her limited vision, she didn't see Bai Yuqiao who was in the dark. She didn't recognize that such a miserable cry belonged to Bai Yuqiao and she didn't expect Bai Yuqiao to cry in such a manner. She was extremely curious. Just who was crying here? Did something happen? In the end, she guessed that it was probably one of the maidservants who had been beaten and scolded by Bai Yuqiao and had been wronged. Just like that, Su Xiaoyu slowly closed her eyes again and gradually fell asleep amidst the cries of her biological sister. After Bai Yuqiao calmed down, he didn't walk over to see Su Xiaoyu. Instead, he resolutely turned around and left. Based on her understanding of Dreamy, if Su Xiaoyu didn't tell him the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion, Dreamy definitely wouldn't let her go. And once Su Xiaoyu revealed the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion, she would die without a doubt. Dreamy was currently busy working with Ning Qing. No matter what, she had to save Su Xiaoyu before Dreamy had the time to think about Su Xiaoyu. Dreamy was the man she had secretly loved for many years. She could give up everything for him, and she was willing to do it. However, she definitely wouldn't be soft-hearted about the matter of Su Xiaoyu, and she definitely wouldn't back down. This matter could only be hidden in her heart. It was enough for her to keep it to herself. Once it was leaked, perhaps even she wouldn't be able to escape this calamity, let alone save her. After exiting the prison, Bai Yuqiao instructed in a low voice, "Find 2 more sensible maidservants to serve her. That girl is an important hostage. If anything happens to her, be careful of your heads." The soldiers could naturally see that Bai Yuqiao was acting strangely, but they didn't dare to probe. They respectfully accepted the order and left. That night, Bai Yuqiao sent his trusted aide to continue investigating Su Xiaoyu's past. Helian Zuixiang had said that Su Xiaoyu was a spy that Chu Tianyin had planted in the Duke of Qin's manor. After being exposed, she had lost her memories. She wanted to know how Chu Tianyin had found Su Xiaoyu, and where Su Xiaoyu had grown up. Zhu Nixia indeed didn't have time to pay attention to Su Xiaoyu's matters. In the past, he would ask a few questions, but recently, he had almost completely forgotten about them. He was busy arranging for the 30,000 warhorses to head south, and also busy urging the second batch of warhorses from Winter Crow Country to reach Tianhe City as soon as possible. Although he had promised to support the D clan's 30,000 warhorses, he wouldn't let go so easily. At this moment, he was secretly investigating with a few beast tamers from the Black clan. These beast tamers were also the trainers of the 30,000 warhorses. Not only would they escort the warhorses to the south, but they would also stay in the army to assist the D clan's cavalry. Zhu Nixia's warhorses were preparing to head south, but a group of people had already arrived at the outskirts of Tianhe City and would soon arrive at his army. This group of people was Uncle Cheng and the others. In the dead of night, Uncle Cheng's group settled down at a rundown temple in the outskirts of Tianhe City. Uncle Cheng and Jean Zizi both knew about what had happened at the 100 Poison sect. Mu Ling and Ning Jing only knew that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi had joined forces to attack the 100 Poison sect, but they didn't know the results. In fact, they could have gone to Zhu Nixia's army to look for Ningqing today, but Uncle Cheng was still very cautious. They decided to wait for a few days and find out more about the situation in Tianhe City before taking action. The carriage stopped outside the temple. Deacon Jean lit a fire in the temple to keep warm. Outside, the north wind whistled. Northernly had already entered the cold season. Ning Jing was wrapped in a large fox fur robe. It kept her warm and also covered her slightly obvious belly. Some people's bellies were very obvious after 2 or 3 months of pregnancy. Some people's bellies only became obvious after 5 or 6 months. Fortunately, Ning Jing belonged to the latter. Coupled with her loose clothes, she really managed to hide it from everyone's eyes. At this time, she was kneeling on a shabby praying mat and praying to a broken Buddha statue. Uncle Cheng sat on a pile of straw to the side. He looked at the fire, his eyes somewhat out of focus. No one knew what he was plotting in his heart. Deacon Jean had just gone to hunt some game and cleaned it by a nearby stream. At this time, he was roasting it over the fire. Mu Ling sat at the side and stared. The more she looked, the more hungry she became. She didn't even realize that Deacon Jean had been looking at her so many times. After roasting it, Deacon Jean first handed her a roasted quail. Mu Ling didn't even think about it and wanted to take it. Who knew that Deacon Jean would pass it to Uncle Cheng? He said to Mu Ling, "You can't eat this kind of thing." Mu Ling finally realized that she was a pregnant woman. She rolled her eyes at Deacon Jean and got up to walk out of the door. "Watch her," Uncle Cheng immediately said. Deacon Jean chased after her and saw that Mu Ling hadn't gone far. She was sitting on the steps at the door. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat down beside Mu Ling. Chapter 965. Deacon Jean sat down by Mu Ling's side, but Mu Ling ignored him. She was wondering why Chi brothers still hadn't found her after leaving so many secret signals on the road. Could it be that something had happened to Chi brother himself? If Chi brother returned to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, he'd definitely find out that she and Ning Jing had been kidnapped. He'd probably remember the secret signal she'd left him. Chi brother had disappeared without a trace after going to Black Tower that day. Just what had happened to him? Mu Ling creased her brows at the thought. Deacon Jean averted his eyes at the sight, unwilling to see her like this. But after a while, Deacon Jean finally spoke up. What are you vexed about? Mu Ling glanced at him before asking another question. Hey, you're Deacon Jean, right? Although Mu Ling asked again and again with certainty, Deacon Jean still refused to answer her. She didn't know when it started, but whenever Deacon Jean took the initiative to talk to Mu Ling wouldn't care what he said but insisted on asking the same question. As usual, Manager Jean turned his head and looked elsewhere. Mu Ling was still worried about Ning Jing, so she glanced back to make sure the old man wasn't bothering Ning Jing before turning back again. Jean Z, we're not far from the Winter Crow clan, right? If I remember correctly, this should be Northern Lee's Sky River City. Even now, she and Ning Jing had no idea where Deacon Jean wanted to take them. But as soon as they entered Northern Lee's borders, they'd lost all hope. Deacon Jean didn't speak. Mu Linger asked again, can you do me a favor and tell me if the D clan has any news about Ning Jing? I'm not plotting anything. It's just that Ning Jing is worried about her brother. Deacon Jean remained silent. Mu Ling pulled a long face and got up to leave. She wouldn't sit with this guy if she couldn't get anything out of him. Unexpectedly, Deacon Jean suddenly spoke. You know about Winter Crow Kingdom? Mu Ling was slightly shocked and immediately sat back down. Are you really taking us to the Winter Crow Kingdom? It should be snowing in Winter Crow Country by now. Deacon Jean sighed. Didn't you want to blackmail my sister and Chi brother? Let's discuss this. I have a way for you to extort more silver. Don't take us to Winter Crow Kingdom. I can't stand the weather there. Mu Ling was almost on the verge of tears. If they went to Winter Crow Kingdom, where birds didn't shit and chickens didn't lay eggs, she and Ning Jing would have no chance of survival. Deacon Jean ignored Mu Ling's nervousness and said mildly, Winter Crow Kingdom is covered in snow in winter. It's clean and holy. When spring comes next year, the snow and ice will melt and the grass will grow and the orioles will fly. It's very beautiful. Mu Ling glanced at Deacon Jean and saw that his face was full of longing for his hometown. She couldn't help but ask, have you been there before? No. I heard about it from the people there, Deacon Jean said mildly. He had been sold to the black market since he was young, so his impression of Winter Crow Kingdom was already vague. Winter Crow Kingdom produced horses and gemstones. Some fearless merchants would go to Winter Crow Kingdom to buy horses and gemstones at a low price and bring them back to the three-way black market to be auctioned. Gradually, some of the smarter clansmen in Winter Crow Kingdom would imitate this practice and bring the horses and gemstones out of Winter Crow Kingdom to be auctioned at the three-way black market. However, this kind of behavior was rare and could be counted on one's fingers in the past few years. This was because the Winter Crow Kingdom's chief had very strict control over the private sale of horses and gemstones. Jun Yixia was able to obtain so many war horses not as a private sale, but as a member of the Northernly royal family. He had also put in a lot of effort. You really want to go, right? Mu Ling probed carefully. Deacon Jean nodded. Mu Ling's heart trembled. She continued to ask, we will be there soon, right? Deacon Jean was about to nod when he realized that something was wrong. He didn't know why, but he suddenly chuckled. Mu Ling knew that her probing had failed. She lowered her head, feeling very helpless. Deacon Jean looked at her for a long time, and for the first time, he told her the truth. We're not going to East Wu. We're going to meet someone. Mu Ling looked up abruptly. Who? You'll know in a few days. Deacon Jean stopped here. Mu Ling was very suspicious. If they would know in a few days, it meant that the person they were meeting was near Sky River City. She didn't understand the situation in Northernly and couldn't figure out the reason. She thought that she would secretly tell Ning Jing later when Deacon Jean and the old man were asleep. With Ning Jing's intelligence, she would definitely be able to name a few suspects. Jean Z, will you go back to Winter Crow Kingdom in the future? Mu Ling continued probing. Mu Ling treated this conversation as a test, but she didn't know what Deacon Jin's purpose was. Yes. He gave a very definite answer. Jean Z, do you have a home in Winter Crow Kingdom? Mu Ling asked again. Deacon Jean shook his head. I don't know. He only knew that he was a slave, and nothing else. In fact, Mu Ling still sympathized with Deacon Jean and Ning Qing when they worked together to trap her and Chi brother. She even planned to return his gold card. Is your surname really Jean? Why is your name Jean Z? Mu Ling asked again. Deacon Jean was silent for a while, but he still answered. He said, I'm a slave. I only have a serial number, but no name. Serial number. Mu Ling was very curious. She really didn't know much about slaves. The slaves in the slave market don't have names. There are 10 slaves in each cage, and they are numbered from 1 to 10. They will only be given a name when they are sold to the new owner, Deacon Jean explained. What's your serial number? Mu Ling asked casually. 7, Deacon Jean said lightly. Because of Chi brother, Mu Ling had a particularly good impression of this number. She muttered to herself, Xiao Qi. Deacon Jean had only heard of Gu's name, but didn't know much about him. For a moment, he didn't realize that the Xiao Qi Mu Ling was talking about was Gu. He just thought that Mu Ling was talking about him. He was a little embarrassed and looked away. Mu Ling suddenly missed Chi brother, and her entire being became sorrowful. She didn't ask any further. However, Deacon Jean continued, on the day Myriad Merchant Hall bought me, I bumped into Ning Qing. He asked me what I wanted, and I said gold. He then rewarded me with the name Gold. Gold, he needed a lot of gold to redeem himself. In this lifetime, he lived for this one thing. Mu Ling turned to look at Deacon Jean. Her heart felt strangely stifled. Even she found it strange. What did this guy's matters have to do with her? She didn't pity him. If she pitied him, who would pity her? Gold, I'll ask you one last time. Will you cooperate with me? I swear on my life that as long as you send me and Ning Jing back to Myriad Merchant Hall, I promise my big sis will return the indenture agreement to you and help you pay off all your debts. Mu Ling said seriously. Deacon Jean gave her a meaningful look before giving a cold smile. He rose to leave as if nothing had happened. After the battle at 100 Poison Sect, Han Yunxi would soon face the D clan's condemnation. Han Yunxi could no longer control Myriad Merchant Hall. He had already made up his mind to hand over the hostages as soon as he saw Ning Qing. Once he got the indenture agreement and the money to pay off his debts, he would immediately return to the Winter Crow clan. He had no interest in Cloud Realm Continent's conflicts and wars. He only wanted to hide as far away as possible. Mu Ling stared at Deacon Jin's retreating form and only felt that he was acting strangely. Why did he suddenly turn hostile? That night, Mu Ling found a chance to have a private conversation with Ning Jing. She told her everything Deacon Jean had said to Ning Jing. Say, who do you think we're going to see? This is Sky River City. They wouldn't be colluding with June Xie, right? Mu Ling asked in a low voice. Ning Jing's first reaction was, Ning Qing. Mu Ling almost screamed at the name, but Ning Jing covered her mouth in time. June Xie doesn't have any money. My big bro was kidnapped by Bai Yuqiao, so Ning Qing must be in June Xie's army. My big bro has silver, or else that old man wouldn't have come here. Jin Zi wouldn't have come either. Ning Jing said seriously. Your big bro is colluding with June Xie. He's going to betray my big sis. Mu Ling was most concerned about this. Impossible. Ning Jing was very serious. Mu Ling remember this. Even if the entire D clan betrays the Western Qin Imperial clan, my big bro won't. He must have been threatened. As Ning Jing spoke, she glanced at the masked old man sleeping on the grass by the door. I suspect that guy is colluding with June Xie. Remember, if you see him in a few days, don't say a word. Act according to circumstances, understand? Mu Ling asked timidly, Ning Jing, why do you trust your big bros so much? Western Qin is his trust and his responsibility. Do you understand? Ning Jing answered. Mu Ling didn't understand. She shook her head and asked again, Ning Jing, do you trust Tang Li? Tang Li. It had been a long time since anyone mentioned this name in front of her. However, she would think of him almost every day. In the past, she always wanted to escape and fly away. Now that they were truly separated, she realized that she wasn't as carefree as she thought she was. The child in her womb was growing bigger by the day. It was almost 5 months old. However, the child's father didn't even know of his existence. Ning Jing didn't say anything and closed her eyes. Mu Ling hesitated for a long time. Finally, she leaned over and whispered, Ning Jing, can I tell you something else? Okay. Ning Jing seemed to be tired. I think that this time, if we really can't go back this time, or if we die in a foreign land. If you don't know about this, then you've lived your life in vain, Mu Ling said very seriously. Ning Jing immediately looked over. What is it? Actually, Tang Li likes you. Mu Ling was afraid that Ning Jing wouldn't believe her, so she quickly told her about Tang Li's situation in prison and her sister's plan to let Tang Li take her away. Ning Jing sat up abruptly and looked at Mu Ling in disbelief. Not far away, Deacon Jean sensed the commotion and looked over. Ning Jing calmed down a little and lay down again. Mu Ling persuaded her in a low voice, don't be anxious. Be careful not to affect the baby again. She had put in a lot of effort to take care of Ning Jing's stomach during the journey. If the baby was affected again, she would definitely cry. Chapter 966. Ning Jing, my sister is also afraid that you'll affect the fetus. Besides, Tang Li also wanted to tell you personally, so, don't blame my sister. She also didn't know that we would be kidnapped. Mu Ling could be considered a good sister. She didn't forget to speak up for Han Yunxi at a time like this. Ning Jing held Mu Ling's hand tightly with one hand and covered her mouth with the other. She was silent for a long time before she choked out, Ling, do you know? I really miss him. Mu Ling was a crybaby. When she heard Ning Jing's choked voice, she couldn't help but cry. "I also missed Chi brother," sob sob. Uncle Ching was startled awake. He walked over angrily, but was stopped by Deacon Jean. "If you continue to make noise, what if people are attracted here?" Uncle Ching said angrily. "This is already Jun Yixie's territory. What are you afraid of?" Deacon Jean retorted. Uncle Ching couldn't refute and could only leave in a huff. Deacon Jean sat back in his original position. He crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the wall with his back straight. He closed his eyes and rested. Just now, he faintly heard Mu Ling call out, "Chi brother." How could that girl cry like this when she missed someone? He lowered his head. His fine bangs covered his eyes. The corners of his mouth were tightly pursed, and he wasn't in a good state. Ning Jing missed Tang Li, and Mu Ling missed Chi brother. Tang Li and Gu had split up to look for them, but they hadn't found any clues yet. Tang Li counted all the routes that 100 Poison sect used to pass through Tianhe City. There were a total of 15 routes. He sent people to search for them one by one. He also ran around day and night, looking for the secret signal. However, it wasn't easy to determine the secret signal. He saw it carved on many trees and corners of houses. He copied all of them and sent them to Gu. He had sent more than 10 of them, but all of them were rejected by Gu. According to Gu, he really had forgotten. If Tang Li knew what the secret signal looked like, it would be much easier to find a target. Unfortunately, he didn't. Finally, one day, Tang Li realized that relying on Gu wasn't reliable. He started a carpet search, while announcing to the world in the name of the Tang sect that as long as Ning Jing was returned to him, he was willing to give up 30 top secret weapon manufacturing blueprints. When the news is news. The first to boil over was naturally the Tang sect. However, the Tang sect's master was Long Fei Yi, and the sect master was Tang Li. Tang Zijin and the others couldn't find Long Fei Yi, and they couldn't contact Tang Li either. They wouldn't announce that Tang Li's orders were invalid, so they could only wait and see. Deacon Jean and Uncle Ching were very surprised. It had to be said that if it weren't for the fact that he wanted to take back his slave contract from Ning Qing, Deacon Jean would still be tempted. The Tang sect had been a power that all sides wanted to win over for the past 100 years. 30 top secret weapons were worth a lot. In fact, Uncle Ching was also tempted. Uncle Ching figured that once they met with Ning Qing, Ning Jing would be a huge bargaining chip for Ning Qing and Jun Yixie's cooperation. Gu had already searched through the eastern forests and entered northernly. His first reaction upon receiving the news was that Tang Li wasn't reliable. He only wanted Ning Jing and didn't mention Mu Ling at all. Thus, Gu immediately used his identity as His Excellency Pill Fiend to announce to the world that as long as Mu Ling was returned to him, he was willing to give up the entire Medicine Ghost Valley. Within a few days, the news had spread all over Cloud Realm continent. Ning Jing and Mu Ling became the subject of everyone's pursuit and discussion. At the same time, they became the envy and jealousy of Cloud Realm continent's women. Unfortunately, the two foolish women were kept in the dark and knew nothing of the matter. One day, Gu was preparing to leave northernly for three-way black market when he suddenly received a black letter with red words. The Book of Pills is unknown. Gu's devastatingly beautiful face turned black as soon as he read it. The Book of Pills had many meanings, one of which was used by an emperor to issue orders. This letter contained Long Fei Ye's orders and a warning to him to meet the poison sect immediately or face the consequences. Gu arched a brow and looked at the letter in his hands with disdain. "Do you think I'll go just because you tell me to?" "Humph. If I'm going, I'll eat this letter." So speaking, he crumpled the letter into a ball and tossed it into a ravine. He turned around and walked away, but he stopped after a few steps. A serious and solemn expression appeared on his frivolous face. The letter didn't say much beyond asking him to meet the poison sect immediately. But Gu understood Long Fei Ye's intentions very well. Long Fei Ye wanted him to meet the poison sect immediately for two reasons: 1, to deal with Bai Yanqing as a fellow undying freak, and 2, to ask him about his immortality. Long Fei Ye had always kept his promise to keep his secret, but would he be able to keep it a secret this time? Actually, he still didn't know how he'd become a poison Gu human. He was raised into a freak so that he wouldn't die no matter what illness or injury he suffered. Later on, he discovered that his appearance and body had remained the same as when he was 20 years old. The legendary poison Gu man was immortal, indestructible, and immortal, so he thought he was one. After the medical conference, Gu Yuntian was locked up. He went to see Gu Yuntian to find out more about this matter. Judging from Gu Yuntian's reaction, he didn't know he was immortal. He was more or less certain that Gu Yuntian had accidentally raised him into a poison Gu human. Over the years, he'd infiltrated the poison sect's forbidden grounds many times in search of a way to break the curse, but to no avail. He'd once joked to Poison Lass that she could save him, but that was just a joke. He'd only sought out the poison sect's poison woman to use the poison sect to topple and destroy Medical City. Gu Qishao sighed softly before whistling to call for his horse. Then he set off for Medical City. A few days later, Han Yunxi's group secretly arrived at Medical City. Long Fei Yi really was a sly old fox. Even after they'd reached Medical City, he still ordered several groups of people disguised as him and Han Yunxi to continue on the road to create a false impression. Thus, news of their whereabouts spread all over the place. In order to ensure their cover, Gu Beiyue met with a few of Medical City's department heads and elders. He learned about the recent situation in Medical City and gave them a few important instructions. Medical City also continued to announce that President Gu Beiyue was in closed-door cultivation. That night, Han Yunxi's group rested in Medical City. They decided to enter the poison sect's forbidden grounds tomorrow morning. After dinner, Gu Beiyue excused himself, saying that he'd forgotten to tell Shen Jueming something, and left first. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were left alone in the courtyard. Han Yunxi propped her chin on her hands as she stared at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi glanced at her, then poured a cup of tea for her. Han Yunxi didn't move, but smiled as she watched. "This is the latest winter slice. Try it," Long Fei Yi said. Winter slice was another name for winter tea. Spring tea was as expensive as oil, especially Mingqian tea. However, winter tea wasn't cheap either. Half of the winter tea leaves were harvested in the autumn, which meant that the leaves were harvested in the winter. But the best winter tea came from winter buds and winter harvests. Han Yunxi still didn't move, but she managed to divert Long Fei Ye's attention. She asked, "Is spring tea better than winter tea?" Han Yunxi used to like drinking tea, but she didn't know much about it. Ever since she'd been with Long Fei Yi, she often drank tea with him, so she'd unknowingly gained a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of rain in spring, so the tea leaves are full and moist. As a result, the tea is fragrant, mellow, and long-lasting. Long Fei sipped his tea as he explained, his tone leisurely and indifferent. As for winter leaves, the cold weather means that the tea leaves grow slowly. The leaves are thick and firm, so they lack the bitter taste and have a hint of cold charm. This is especially true for high mountains, where the cold charm is especially obvious. If someone who didn't know his identity saw his carefree and relaxed demeanor, they might really think he was a reclusive expert who'd seen through the affairs of the world, calculated the hearts of the world, and stood aloof from the world. But those who knew his identity knew that he not only saw through the affairs of the world, but also understood the hearts of the world. He didn't stand aloof from the world, but held it in the palm of his hand. No matter how others saw him, Han Yunxi liked his current appearance the most. She couldn't help but want to play a song on the zither to help him drink tea and throw the troubles of the poison goo humans to the back of her mind. Long Fei Yi, where's that monarch's whisper of yours? Han Yunxi asked. That year at the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet, Chu Qingge had challenged her to a zither duel, but she'd refused. When she returned to the Duke of Qin's estate, she'd played Lovers of the Liang for Long Fei Yi to hear. Back then, she'd used Long Fei Yi's monarch's whisper of hers. Monarch's whisper of time. You want to play the zither in Jiangnan's plum blossom gardens? Long Fei Yi asked. No, I'm just asking, Han Yunxi sighed with emotion. When can we go back to Jiangnan's plum blossom gardens? In another 2 months, all the plum blossoms will be in full bloom, right? 2 months. Long Fei Yi silently calculated the time. 2 months, they probably wouldn't be able to go back. He had plenty of gardens and gardens, but she had no interest in any of them except Jiangnan's plum blossom gardens. Wasn't he the same? Next year, then. Starting from next winter, we'll go there every year to celebrate the new year, Long Fei Yi promised. Han Yunxi nodded seriously. The situation in Cloud Realm Continent should have stabilized after a year. 1 year. Han Yunxi was silently calculating the time as well. As for what it was, only she knew. Their tea grew cold in the time it took to speak. Tea had to be drunk while it was hot, especially in winter. Long Fei Yi helped Han Yunxi change her cup, but Han Yunxi immediately changed the subject. Long Fei Yi, by Yanqing is undying and indestructible. How lonely and boring must he be? Will he? Long Fei Yi asked mildly. At least he'll be in pain. If he has a sweetheart, family, or friends, he'll definitely be in pain, Han Yunxi said seriously. Watching one's loved ones grow old and leave one's side while remaining powerless in the same place. How much pain would he have to endure if he had to personally send away his loved ones? An undying and indestructible person would only end up being abandoned in the end. Han Yunxi quickly denied her own thoughts. Bai Yanqing probably won't. Bai Yanqing probably had nothing left in his heart. He only had himself. Long Fei Yi fell silent for a long time before he finally said, if it was anyone else, they probably would. His slender fingers tapped lightly on the table. Goo, that fellow, should be on his way here by now. Chapter 967. For the entire night, Han Yunxi kept diverting Long Fei Yi's attention so that Long Fei Yi didn't have a chance to make her drink tea. But in the end, Long Fei Yi still frowned and asked, "You don't like winter flakes?" "I'm too full to drink." Han Yunxi's reason was very good. Long Fei Yi wanted to ask more, but Han Yunxi grabbed his hand and smiled as they walked. Long Fei Yi, if T and I were to fall off a cliff one day, who would you choose? Long Fei Yi smiled helplessly. There's no need to fall off a cliff. If you don't like it, I'll try to quit starting tomorrow. Han Yunxi laughed. I'm just kidding. The two had just entered the room when Su Donglin came over. Your Highness, Miss Mingxiang has arrived at Medical City. We'll meet at the Poison Sect's Forbidden Grounds tomorrow, Long Fei Yi instructed calmly. Han Yunxi was surprised. Why did you have Bailey Mingxiang come? The sword had already pierced his heart, but Bai Yanqing still couldn't die. Heaven knows if his body was even harder to destroy than a steel wall. Even if Bailey Mingxiang lured Bai Yanqing over, the blazing red lotus wouldn't be able to kill Bai Yanqing. But Long Fei Yi asked seriously, if Bai Yanqing's undying body is exposed, would he still need to kill Bailey Mingxiang? Han Yunxi finally understood Long Fei Ye's meaning. Bai Yanqing's martial arts weren't that far behind Long Fei Ye's, so he knew that Bailey Mingxiang was someone who could dual cultivate with Long Fei Yi, so he had to kill Bailey Mingxiang. He didn't want to see Long Fei Ye's martial arts improve and widen the gap between them. But now that they knew about Bai Yanqing's undying body, Bai Yanqing didn't need to worry about Long Fei Ye's martial arts improving. In any case, he didn't need to hide his undying body from Long Fei Yi anymore. He could reveal his true strength and compete with Long Fei Yi. And no matter how strong Long Fei Ye's martial arts were, even if he cultivated the lustbite energy to the 3rd level, he still couldn't kill Bai Yanqing, right? In other words, there was no need for Bai Yanqing to find trouble with Bailey Mingxiang could. Could it be that you suspect the lustbite energy? Han Yunxi couldn't believe it. The lustbite's energy, Long Fei Ye's energies. Perhaps. Long Fei Yi was just testing the waters. He really wasn't confident. If Bai Yanqing found them and continued to attack Bailey Mingxiang like he did at 100 Poison Sect, it would be very suspicious. We can give it a try. Han Yunxi nodded, secretly hoping that she'd be able to gain something from the Poison Sect's forbidden grounds tomorrow. After closing the door, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi didn't talk much. They still had important matters to attend to. In the past 2 months, with Long Fei Ye's help, Han Yunxi had already cultivated 100% of her Nirvana heart power. Her needle skills were getting better and better, and she'd learned quite a bit of Qigong as well. During the 100 Poison Sect incident, she'd been afraid of exposing her martial arts, so she'd followed Long Fei Yi and didn't fight. Now that she could control her Nirvana heart power, it was time for Long Fei Yi to officially begin dual cultivation with her. The reason Han Yunxi wanted to cultivate Nirvana heart arts was because Long Fei was cultivating the same thing. Nirvana heart power was the foundation of their dual cultivation, as well as the medium for it. Yin and Yang energies complemented each other. Only through a medium could they influence and help each other. And Long Fei Ye's lustbite energy needed to borrow the power of Yin and Yang to break through. In this dual cultivation, Long Fei Yi would be the master, and Han Yunxi would be the support. Long Fei Yi could use the strengthening of his Nirvana heart power and the support of Yin and Yang energy to push the lustbite energy forward. Meanwhile, Han Yunxi's internal energy would also grow stronger. Once the dual cultivation succeeded, she'd be able to control the lustbite energy as she wished. At that time, learning any of Celestial Mountain's sword arts would be a piece of cake for her. Are you ready? Once you start, you must cultivate for 2 hours every day for the next 3 months. You can't stop. Long Fei Yi reminded her seriously. Han Yunxi casually replied, "What do I need to prepare? In any case, I've decided to rely on you for the rest of my life. I won't leave." Long Fei Yi obviously wanted to laugh, but he didn't. He turned his head and coughed a few times. Then let's begin. Long Fei Yi chose a rather spacious warm couch and moved the small tea table in the middle down. The two sat face to face on the warm couch, looking into each other's eyes. Dual cultivation meant cultivating together at the same time. Not only cultivating the body, but also cultivating the heart. Cultivating the body meant that the two of them had to combine their martial arts into one. Cultivating the heart meant that they had to have a tacit understanding of each other. The two of them sat quietly for a full hour. Unknowingly, the two of them had already closed their eyes. They didn't need to look, but used their hearts to feel each other's existence. Suddenly, they opened their eyes at the same time and smiled at each other, understanding each other's intentions. They were originally husband and wife with deep feelings for each other. Cultivating the heart was not difficult for them. Long Fei Yi grabbed the profound frost sword hanging on the wall. He pulled out the sword and gave it to Han Yunxi, leaving the scabbard for himself. Just one sword. I'll have to trouble you for a while. I'll have Su Donglin find a good sword for you. Long Feiyi said. Okay, I'll wait. Han Yunxi was overjoyed. She was always full of anticipation for the gift this fellow wanted to give her. Actually, Han Yunxi did not feel wronged at all. Long Feiyi's profound frost sword had never been touched by anyone since he took it from the old man Kenzo. Han Yunxi was the first. Thinking back, Duanmu Yao had racked her brains to obtain this sword. Unfortunately, she did not even touch it. Long Feiyi held the scabbard while Han Yunxi held the sword. In the room, Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi quickly exchanged blows. Han Yunxi did not know any sword techniques. Long Feiyi only told her, "You can block." Han Yunxi did as she was told. As she blocked, she unknowingly found that her sword seemed to have strength. Han Yunxi did not understand anything, but she completely trusted Long Feiyi and followed his rhythm. Unknowingly, his movements, which were messy and disorderly at the start, seemed to have become orderly and orderly. Han Yunxi's innate talents were excellent, so she quickly grasped the rules and changed from passive to active. Her sword stabbed towards Long Feiyi, but Long Feiyi blocked it with his scabbard and accurately retracted Han Yunxi's sword. "You're almost catching up to me in the past," Long Feiyi was thrilled. Han Yunxi's comprehension skills exceeded his expectations. "You've taught me well." Han Yunxi grinned. Long Feiyi removed his scabbard and tossed it to one side. Then he began to guide Han Yunxi through the sword dance. He swung his sword multiple times in a seemingly calm manner, but Han Yunxi could clearly feel the sword sheath circling around them, strong and vigorous. "Transform your energy into qi, and qi into light," Long Feiyi murmured. "Yunxi, close your eyes. Don't think about anything, I'll guide you." Long Feiyi wrapped one arm around her waist and the other around her sword-wielding hand to guide her. It was unclear what Long Feiyi felt, but Han Yunxi only felt like she wasn't cultivating, but dancing. Surrounded by his aura, she didn't even want to open her eyes. She only wanted to immerse herself in it forever. The first dual cultivation took a long time. The two of them didn't finish until midnight. Han Yunxi sat on the bed, clearly feeling the warmth in her dantian. There was a strange yet familiar qi settling in there. She rubbed her stomach with a smile. "It's warm and very comfortable." Long Feiyi immediately reached over. Han Yunxi recovered her senses and followed his touch. But Long Feiyi's hand didn't move away as soon as it touched her. He had been half lying down, but unknowingly moved closer to Han Yunxi. By the time Han Yunxi realized what was going on, it was already too late. Long Feiyi gave her a light push, causing her to topple backwards onto the bed covers. He leaned over and looked down at her, a naughty smile on his lips. Ever since her leg injury had healed, he had yet to properly dote on her. Han Yunxi's hands pressed against Long Feiyi's body. Long Feiyi was dissatisfied and was about to speak up when Han Yunxi actually helped him undress. Long Feiyi was very surprised. Han Yunxi's face was clearly red, but her movements were becoming bolder and bolder. Once Han Yunxi took the initiative, there was nothing she couldn't do. It wouldn't end so easily. As expected, Han Yunxi slept until noon when they were supposed to set out early the next morning. When she woke up, she was so shocked that she forgot to put on her shoes and got off the bed. Long Feiyi was sitting on the side, reading a secret letter. He glanced at her jade feet and said unhappily, "Aren't you cold? Put on your shoes. It's already noon, why didn't you wake me up?" Han Yunxi complained. Long Feiyi's gaze was already back on the letter. He said mildly, "You're so tired. It's better to sleep more." Han Yunqi had just returned to the bed when she recalled how she was so tired that she had to beg for mercy under him last night. She almost fell onto the bed. She snuck a glance back and looked suspiciously at Long Fei Yi. She was incomparably bewildered. Does this guy never get tired? Although it was embarrassing, Han Yunqi didn't regret it. She was secretly working hard towards a certain goal. Han Yunqi cleaned up and ate a meal when Gu Beiyue arrived. They secretly rushed to the poison sect sky pit and found that Bailey Mingxiang had been waiting for a long time. "Your Highness, Princess." Bailey Mingxiang bowed, then nodded at Gu Beiyue. She thought that she would be able to spend the rest of her life peacefully after returning to the army. She never expected to come back and see His Highness and the princess again. She was actually very flustered, but she didn't show it. However, even if she showed it, who would notice it? "Princess, is there any news of little Yu?" This was what she was most worried about. The D clan had been searching for Ning Cheng's whereabouts this entire time, but wasn't Han Yunqi the same? Ning Cheng's whereabouts were equivalent to Su Xiaoyu's whereabouts. Jun Yixie's side was the most suspicious, but Long Fei Ye's men hadn't been able to find anything despite their inquiries. It was harder to infiltrate an important military base than anywhere else. And given Jun Yixie's personality, if Ning Cheng fell into his hands, he wouldn't be able to keep his cool. He would definitely show up to save his master after the battle at 100 Poison Sect. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi didn't know that Jun Yixie and Bai Yanqing's master-disciple relationship had long been severed. Otherwise, she wouldn't have eliminated Jun Yixie from her list of suspects. "Let's go to the altar," Han Yunqi said seriously. Last time, they discovered the altar in the underground palace of the Poison Grounds purely by chance. They'd fallen into the abyss due to a crack in the ground. Now, they didn't need to go through the underground palace to get to the altar. They could just go straight to the abyss. What would happen at the altar? Chapter 968. To the west of the Poison Sect's forbidden grounds was a large rift valley. Inside the valley was a dense, dark forest. Every tree and blade of grass could be used to create poisons. As soon as Han Yunqi's group entered the forest, they could feel the chill. The valley was dark and cold to begin with, and it was winter now. It was a very strange sight. The vegetation was still lush, but the air was as cold as winter. Han Yunqi was already wearing a cloak, but Long Fei took off his own to drape it over her shoulders. Then he held her by the shoulders. Gu Beiyue and Bailey Mingxiang walked behind them and saw the scene. Bailey Mingxiang's expression was calm as if he hadn't seen anything. However, Gu Beiyue's lips curved into a warm smile. The deeper they went into the forest, the dimmer the light became. Finally, just as they were about to enter the darkness, they saw a large circular altar in the distance. The altar was made of stone and looked very simple and unadorned. It was surrounded by stones with a tall, wordless stele in the center. From a distance, the entire altar looked solemn and mysterious. Han Yunqi hadn't forgotten the feeling she'd felt when she first saw the stele. It was like her soul had been sucked away and she couldn't control herself. Long Fei Yi also couldn't forget Han Yunqi's dazed expression when he first saw her here. If possible, he didn't want to come here a second time. Han Yunqi didn't dare to stare at it for too long. She turned back to Gu Beiyue and saw that Gu Beiyue was also staring at the stele. "Gu Beiyue, were you the one who saved me back then?" Han Yunqi smiled. Back then, when they were fighting with Chu Tianyin in the secret passage, the passage had caught fire and collapsed, causing a crack to appear in the ground. No one had expected it at the time, so Long Fei Yi didn't have time to catch her. She remembered that when she fell, her head was dizzy. When she woke up, she had already landed on the ground and was safe and sound. At that time, she only felt that it was very strange, and faintly felt that there was a white shadow following behind her. Gu Beiyue laughed. It is this subordinate who has frightened the princess. You saved her life. Long Fei Yi would only talk more when he was with Gu Beiyue. More than one life, Han Yunxi said seriously. Gu Beiyue had saved her many times while he was hiding his identity. The three of them chatted and laughed. Bailey Mingxiang was alone and very quiet. She looked at Gu Beiyue with envy. She firmly believed that Dr. Gu liked Princess. However, the princess still didn't know about it. Presumably, she wouldn't know for the rest of her life. To be able to love someone to this extent was also a kind of happiness. Unfortunately, she couldn't do it anymore. As they approached, the wordless stele in the altar gradually became clearer. The wordless stele was still simple and mysterious. The upper part had been weathered and blackened, but the lower part was covered in moss. The upper part was lifeless, while the lower part was full of vitality. It was like light and darkness, life and death intertwined. I saw words on this stele in my dream, but I didn't finish reading it, Han Yunxi said seriously. They stopped outside the altar and could clearly see that there was not a single word on the stele. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue looked at the stele seriously. Gu Beiyue even stepped over the short stone wall and walked in. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had wanted to get closer for a long time, but they were a little afraid. The stele was clearly only a head taller than Gu Beiyue, but Gu Beiyue felt small standing in front of it. Even Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi felt the same way. Gu Beiyue walked around and looked carefully. He even gently touched the moss on the stele, but he didn't find anything. Wait here, I'll go take a look. Long Fei Yi's fear was all because of Han Yunxi. Otherwise, there was no place in this world that he wouldn't dare to go. Han Yunxi nodded obediently. Long Fei Yi went over, but he didn't touch the stele. Instead, he checked the grass around the stele. Gu Beiyue had checked it before, so he wasn't worried. He stomped on the ground and knocked on the grass. Then, he carefully checked the short stone wall, but he didn't find the mechanism that he expected. Usually, the altar would be the highest place of the clan, and all the inheritance would be hidden in the altar. But, if there were no hidden mechanisms, and there were no words on the stele, what could they do? Gu Beiyue turned back, and said seriously, Princess, maybe, the secret is hidden in the poison storage space. Han Yunxi didn't say anything. Maybe, if she tried to walk closer and look at the stele carefully, maybe the same thing would happen again, and she would see the words on the stele again. She looked at Long Fei Yi, wanting to ask for his permission. But, at this moment, Gu Beiyue suddenly exclaimed, something's wrong. What's wrong? Long Fei Yi got up and walked over. There's something wrong with this stele. Gu Beiyue punched the stele. The stele actually made a faint buzzing sound. It's not stone. Long Fei Yi was very sure. He clenched his fist and punched it too. Long Fei's punch was much stronger than Gu Beiyue's, so the stone stele shattered into pieces with a loud crack. After the fragments fell to the ground, they saw a wordless stele made of Xian gold. There wasn't a single scratch on it, and it was perfectly preserved. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue simultaneously examined it carefully, but neither of them found any words on the stele. But it had to be said that this was a huge discovery. Gu Beiyue and Han Yunxi exclaimed at the same time, blood. The blood of a direct descendant of the poisoned sect could open the Xian gold door. Gu Beiyue had used the Xian gold door to confirm Han Yunxi's identity as a direct descendant of the poisoned sect. Why was this steel made of Xian gold? And why did it use stone as a disguise? Something was clearly wrong. Han Yunxi strode over, but before she could move, Long Feiyi grabbed her hand. How could Gu Beiyue know that Han Yunxi had transmigrated? He only thought that Long Feiyi was worried that Han Yunxi would be in danger if a crack suddenly appeared in the ground. Thinking up to here, Gu Beiyue turned to Bailey Mingxiang. Miss Mingxiang, if anything happens later, you should return to Medical City. Gu Beiyue was such a warm and attentive person. Bailey Mingxiang quickly nodded. Yes, thank you, Dr. Gu. The invisible Su Donglin appeared and stood by Gu Beiyue's side to protect him. Han Yunxi bit her finger and carefully dripped a drop of blood onto the steel. They hadn't seen what had happened at the Xian gold door last time, but this time they saw it clearly. As soon as Han Yunxi's blood touched the steel, it was immediately absorbed and disappeared. Now that the blood had dripped, all that was left was to wait. However, the wait was a little long. Even Long Feiyi had never been so nervous. Han Yunxi was flustered and couldn't help but lean closer to him. Gu Beiyue frowned and was rarely so serious. However, no matter how long they waited, nothing happened, whether it was inside or outside the altar. Could it be that there was something wrong with this method? Or was this Xian gold steel just a coincidence and didn't have any special meaning? Inside the steel, is there still? Long Feiyi was about to try to break the Xian gold steel when a rustling sound suddenly came from around them. The short stone walls around the altar began to crack, just like how the wordless monument had been shattered, and the stones kept falling down. Soon, Han Yunxi and the others saw a very beautiful scene. The entire wall around the altar was made of colored glass and had good transparency. They could faintly see that there were many unknown rare flowers and plants growing inside. Han Yunxi immediately activated the detox system, but it didn't detect any poison in these flowers and plants. The poison sect's forbidden grounds were filled with poison, to say nothing of something hidden so well. These flowers and plants had to be poisonous. It looked like the poison was very rare, or else the detox system wouldn't have failed to detect the slightest abnormality. Han Yunxi looked around and found that there was a fruit stalk left on each of the plants. It was obvious that someone had plucked the fruit. The fruit stalks looked very fresh. Could it be that they'd just been plucked? Why had these poisonous plants been specially raised here? Who had raised them? How long had it been? What kind of poison had they plucked all the fruits to make? Han Yunxi was full of questions. If she didn't understand, Long Feiyi and Gu Beiyue were even more confused. It should have been Bai Yanqing who plucked them, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Besides Han Yunxi, Bai Yanqing was probably the only one who could open the steel. What is he trying to do now? They hadn't discovered the antidote to the poison Gu humans, but they discovered Bai Yanqing's secret instead. Han Yunxi was very worried. Let's keep looking, Long Feiyi said mildly. He immediately looked to the right and said coldly, who's there? Su Donglin reacted the fastest and immediately chased after the man. Long Feiyi had the shadow guard protect Gu Beiyue while he brought Han Yunxi with him. They quickly overtook Su Donglin and saw a figure running out of the forest. There weren't many people who could come to this place. Long Feiyi didn't plan to let the man go so easily. Even though the man had run far away, he still hugged Han Yunxi tightly and chased after him. But when they reached the darkness, Han Yunxi stopped them. It's too dark here. We can't see anything. It's very dangerous. Let's go back. Long Feiyi was a veteran and knew that it was unwise to continue chasing. Moreover, the man was hiding in the surroundings and the shadow guard and Su Donglin didn't notice him. It was enough to show that the man's martial arts were extraordinary. Although it was a pity, Long Feiyi still listened to Han Yunxi's advice and turned back. Everything was fine at the altar. Gu Beiyue saw them and quickly asked, "Who is it?" Long Fei Yi said mildly, "We didn't catch up. His qigong is good and his martial arts are not bad. It seems to be a man." Bai Yanqing, Gu Beiyue guessed. But he immediately rejected this idea. If it was Bai Yanqing, why would he hide and run away? From the looks of it, he must be very familiar with this place, Long Fei Yi said mildly. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue were alarmed. This man was the altar, so if he was familiar with this place, it was very likely that he was a direct descendant of the poison sect. "Let's go back first. We'll talk when we get back," Long Fei Yi said mildly. Since they'd already been targeted, it wouldn't be wise for them to stay here any longer. Han Yunxi smiled helplessly. She was the new poison sect head, but she still had to be so cautious in her own territory. She said, "Send a few poison guards to stand guard. Don't let the intruder come close." She had a feeling that the flowers and plants in the glass wall held a huge secret. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.